Hello there, I'm Terry Duke. As part of my classic games series where I review the classic games from my childhood, I recently played Mount & Blade Warband, one of my favorite RPGs. However, as I've said in this episode, a huge part of Mount & Blade is the mods. Mod is short for modification, which is when gamers modify games to their liking. Sometimes it's pretty cool, sometimes it's just hilarious. And today, I'm ranking my favorite mods from Warband. All of the mods come from moddb.com, and along with this video, I also made a video for how to install mods in case you have the game and don't know how to add mods. And maybe after this video, you'll want to play the game even more. So here we go, my favorite mods from Mount & Blade Warband. First off, we have 1860s America. Already we're taking the game in a very different direction, going straight past the Middle Ages of the base game to the Wild West. Armors are virtually all replaced with cowboy hats and military uniforms. Swords are a backup weapon now, the main weapons are rifles and revolvers. Surprisingly, the reload animations and combat mechanics work pretty well. It gets pretty close to a regular shooter. And because this is Mount & Blade, you get to have your own warband, though I guess in this context it would be your own regiment. Being set in America, the main factions are the Union, the Confederacy, and the Frontier, along with some native tribes. So we have most of North America as a map, and a lot of effort went into the scenery. In battle, my favorite feature is the firing line, very well implemented. Your soldiers will form up into two lines, and you can give commands for when to fire. So it's a lot of fun. In sieges, most settlements are defended by forts, which look pretty historical. So if you're into the Wild West, this mod is for you. That said, besides the innovation of guns instead of swords, the rest of the game works pretty much the same way as native. It's still a lot of fun, but once the joy of using guns instead of swords runs out, there's not much left to this mod. Next up, in a similar genre, the Red Wars. The Red Wars takes us to Calradia, but in World War I era, with strong communist revolution vibes, so it's pretty funny. Much like 1860s America, the main weapons are guns, except we're past the gunpowder era, so most guns can fire multiple rounds and reload much faster. In terms of main changes, that's pretty much it. Unfortunately, it was never completed. While it has some scenery, most castles, even though they have been replaced by forts on the world map, are still the native scenery. In that context, sieges are completely unbalanced. As for battles, well, because we use guns, the range for troops is massively increased, so most battles end up being firing lines where the exchange can last a long time. If you can catch an army out of formation though, this can make battles pretty fun, but otherwise battles can be much harder and no amount of armor, what little there is, can save you from bullets. All in all, it's 1860s America, but more intense. At number 6 we have Gegokujo. Gegokujo takes us to feudal Japan around the 1600s, so the map is replaced with Japan. All towns are fairly historically accurate, as are the weapons and armor. So if you're into samurai stuff, Gegokujo is the mod to get you hyped up. Seriously, they did an amazing job. They replaced most of the soundtracks to be more immersive, they did solid work on the environments, and the weapons and armors are so cool. On top of that, almost all fighting animations have been redone to match the kendo fighting style, which is so awesome. As for recruiting, Gegokujo differentiates between two types of soldiers, peasant conscripts or Ashigaru, and samurai. Ashigaru troops can be upgraded to be decent fighters, but essentially, all high-end troops are samurai. This is actually very historically accurate and well implemented. And the last big change for this mod are the sieges, which also fit the types of sieges more associated with Japan. Instead of scaling high walls, we usually need to go through a long path without cover to get all the way to the main castle. This made siege battles more dynamic in my opinion, as you're not constantly fighting over a single choke point. So anyway, Gegokujo is the samurai mod to get, if that's what you're into. At number 5, I picked Swords of Damocles. This is a bit of an obscure one, but nonetheless a lot of fun. This one changed the fictional world of Calradia to Ponavosa, which is over 3 times bigger than Calradia, with more factions. At this point, we're closer to the vanilla version of the game, but still, they added a whole bunch of features. They added lots of cool armors and weapons. What I like mainly about this mod is that they solved a lot of the grinding issues I have with vanilla. Do you need to make a lot of money quickly? Tournaments and Sword of Damocles allow you to bet outrageous amounts. Here I made 300,000 dinars from a single tournament. If you're tired of running around looking for recruits, mercenary groups in taverns are much larger, so you can build up your party much faster. Besides that, the main feature of Sword of Damocles is that there is a lot more kingdom management. Each settlement, whether a town, castle or village, has tons of new buildings to construct, which all come with benefits. Ultimately, Sword of Damocles doesn't seem like it changes much from the base game, but its additions make for a breath of fresh air. And number 4, Warsaw Conquest. I want to be clear, I initially ranked the mods by memory and I haven't played some of them in years. Warsaw Conquest was still in its early development when I last played it, and playing it again today, I'm simply in awe. Warsaw Conquest is meant to be based on Warhammer Fantasy, a series which I unfortunately don't know much about, but damn. Not only is this a massive map, there is so much diversity in it. Warsword is the fantasy mod for Warband. You have anything from orcs, dwarves, giants, skeletons, lizards and elves, and immersive scenery for all of them. Honestly, I can't cover it all, the mod is just that massive. A true work of art, just get it and see for yourself. Seriously. From here we're getting into my absolute favorites, starting with Britannwalda. Britannwalda is a mod that takes us to the UK during the Dark Ages. The countries are torn by war and people live miserably. That's the main tone of this mod, and judging from the gameplay options for this mod specifically, it was meant to be seriously hardcore. I mean, your weapons could break mid-battle. There was also a stamina system where you slow down if you fight too much. Taking injuries in battle can lead to bleeding, which means after a certain point your life bar will start going down by itself, and it's up to you to win the battle before you pass out from blood loss. You could even get permanent injuries that lower your stats. But the main feature from this mod that I absolutely loved was the siege mode. In the main game, as well as virtually every mod, sieges are always the same. You build ladders or a siege tower, then assault the walls. That's it. But the team behind Britannwalda came up with something else entirely. Features to actually starve a garrison out rather than assault the walls. The way this works is that when besieging a castle, you can use the planning method. In here, you can blockade a castle by land and sea to stop reinforcements and starve the garrison out. You can also fortify your camp so that if outside forces come to lift the siege, you can defend yourself from an entrenched position. And seriously, the fact that this mod came out in 2011 and Tell Worlds did not implement this in Bannerlord yet is insulting. But essentially, instead of going through long, repetitive assaults to take down a castle, Britannwalda allows you to actually starve the garrison out, at which point they will surrender. And throughout sieges, you will often come upon unique situations, such as the enemy making surprise attacks on your siege camp, and choosing what to do will give you randomized results, sometimes extending the siege for a long time, or even force you to abandon if you start losing too many men to things like disease. Going from this mod to any other, it makes all other sieges feel lacking. However, the one thing I'm not big on in Britannwalda is the tone. Like I said, it's the Dark Ages, everything is dirty and sucks. As a result, most battles don't have epic soundtracks to get you hyped up, and the music itself is often depressing and repetitive. I know that's exactly what they were going for, so that's just me. At number 2, I'm putting two mods together because I consider them equals, A World of Ice and Fire and A Clash of Kings. Both mods are total conversions taking us to Westeros, the world from the Game of Thrones show or the novels. So both mods feature the entire world, all of the same locations, and the same characters. You can get the armors and weapons from the show as well. So being a massive fan of the books, these mods are simply awesome and immersive. In terms of which is better, again they're both good in their own way, both offer unique missions that have you interact with characters from the novels. Mainly, A World of Ice and Fire differs by having implemented a lot of features found in Britannwalda, so sieges are definitely a lot more fun for me. A Clash of Kings has a lot more unique locations to visit, which gives you more information about the lore, and the mysterious explorations make for a uniquely immersive experience. But all in all, it's Warband, but in Westeros, and they're both awesome. And finally, my favorite Warband mod is Paris Snow. Paris Snow is an ambitious mod meant to bring the fantasy of Warsaw Conquest and Lord of the Rings while also coming up with something unique. Paris Snow is a massive continent which features humans, elves, giants, and dwarves. So, where to begin? amazing soundtrack, uniquely badass looking armors and weapons, riding wolves into battle, unique quests and items, so much variety of bandits. And the modders took the time to really build up a story here. I won't spoil it, but in the Concepts tab, they've written an entire lore to the game, to the factions and the bandit groups, and the biggest feature is an incoming invasion from a foreign empire, which will attack Paris-No with thousands of troops. On top of that, kingdom management is pretty complex too, similar to Sword of Damocles, but it also adds the ability to hire a spy master to be cunning with your rivals, and a marshal to recruit armies and patrols. And troops become so ridiculously OP after a while that it makes for some of the most badass battles you can ever have. So that about wraps it up. It goes without saying, Warband has some amazing mods made by an amazing community. I left links for all the mods in the description, so have fun. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hello there, I'm Duke, and welcome to my channel. Over a month ago, I made a video showing my favorite mods for Mount & Blade Warband, and as of now, this is by far my most popular video, and many of you have been very supportive. Seeing how many people love Warband and its mods, I've decided to make another video, this time playing the mods recommended to me in the comments of my previous video. In total, I played 7 mods, and much like my previous video, I'll be ranking them. Thank you for watching, and onto the mods. For starters, we have Toloberia. This is a bit of an obscure mod, and to be honest, I was initially underwhelmed. Besides taking place in a totally different world, with new factions and weapons and armor, there just really doesn't seem like there's much to this mod. Not that I'm trying to disregard the changes though, the armors and weapons do look pretty awesome. And my OCD appreciates that in this mod, there is no culture tied to any villages. They all give you peasants with the same troop trees. But what really surprised me though are the amazing fighting animations with two-handed weapons. Holy hell, that looks so badass. It's actually pretty historical sword fighting, and I don't know what to say, it just looks so awesome. Only thing I'm not a big fan of though is fair game. It's a feature that can be disabled via the camp menu, but basically it makes it so you can't reduce damage for yourself or your soldiers. On top of that, the surgery skill is kept at 4, ensuring you'll always lose a lot of troops no matter what. And so while duel tournaments are a lot of fun with the animations, with fair game enabled, those fights are short. Apparently, there is a new story in this mod, but it didn't trigger anywhere I went. Last I checked, it's a work in progress, and the last update was 2 years ago. So to sum it up, not a whole lot, but the fighting animation is uniquely awesome, and by itself, it's worth a try. Next up, something light, Diplomacy for Litdom Reloaded. This mod aims to reinvigorate Calradia. On the surface, we have the same map, same characters and factions, but troop trees have been revamped significantly. There's new weapons and armors, as well as new fighting animations and sounds. Some castle sceneries and battle maps have also been redone as well. I would say if you're new to modding, this mod is a good place to start, as it doesn't take you far from vanilla, but nonetheless makes a lot of changes. In addition to everything I just mentioned, armies and garrisons are much larger now, and thanks to the mod options, it's possible to fight an entire battle in a single round, which is a must for me nowadays. In sieges, siege towers are so much cooler, and there's a platform at the top to shoot arrows from. But the coolest feature of all that I haven't really seen in any mods, at least not yet, is the body slide feature. Essentially, if you die, you will take control of one of your soldiers, so as long as you got soldiers on the field, you will respawn at random indefinitely, which is pretty cool, as you'll never know who you end up with and what gear you'll have either. Other than that, it's pretty much the same old Calradia. It's great if you're new at modding, but besides that, this mod is about to be quickly overshadowed, I think. Now, I'm gonna get some hate for this. Up next, Prophecy of Pandor. Of all the comments I received, this was by far the most mentioned mod. POP is a mod that takes us to the fantasy world of Pandor, torn by several factions. It's heavily praised on ModDB as one of the best Warband mods, but I had very little memory of it. And I'll be honest with you, maybe it got overhyped for me personally, but I wasn't all that impressed. Sure, it's got a huge world, well-developed lore, and new troops and items, but what total conversion doesn't supply those? In terms of gameplay though, my personal experience ranged from what you'd normally expect to frustrating. I spent the first 2 hours just building up my warband, finding bandits and such. It wasn't until I looked up online that I figured out what I'm supposed to do, as I didn't come upon any particular characters that will offer me any unique quests. So going through a post on Steam, I went to find a precious gem in some chest hidden in some town, like I ever was supposed to figure that out. Then I had to find a map in exchange for the gem, except no, apparently since the last update, the guy who gives you the map no longer takes the gem. Instead he wants a big bag of diamonds, which you can only get from guildmasters in town at the price of 100,000 dinars, and you can only make the deal if you have a relation higher than 15 with the town. So here I am, escorting caravans like a peasant to increase my relation with the town, just so I can move on with the walkthrough. After all of that, I finally get the map to a place where I can get unique weapons, so I get the bow. But the bow is still fairly inaccurate. Turns out I can upgrade it by finding more gems, but the ways to get gems is so complicated that at that point, I just said screw it. So, I'm sorry, I'm sure there's a lot more to this mod I just haven't experienced yet, but it was getting way too complicated for no reason. And although it's normal when it comes to mods to have to look up online to get things done, that was the only way I was ever going to fully play this mod, and it's not like I get a whole lot out of it. For example, tournaments are typically a good way to make quick money on the start of a game, but Pandora doesn't let you play in tournaments until you get sufficient renown, which kinda defeats the purpose. And the tournaments, at least the ones I played, are objectively the worst I've ever seen. Basically same as vanilla, except my weapons are stuck on lance and club, and the club doesn't do jack. Sieges have seen no changes either, so I'll stick to Printed Walda on this one. That's not to say there's no good. I do generally appreciate the voice acting, for example.
Ah, my lady. Well met indeed.
The Arnold Schwarzenegger cameo was pretty neat.
I'll crush your people, see them driven before me, and hear the lamentation of your women.
I also like the voice commands in battle. That's cool.
Hold this position! Charge!
And I did find some unique quests with potential. Not to mention the mod seems to tailor itself based on your choices during character creation, so I'm sure there's a lot more to it. Let me know in the comments if I really need to keep going. Far as I can tell, the mod is well polished, but unlike the other mods I've played, I feel it takes way too long to fully show what it can do, and that's all I've got for Pandora. Going deeper into fantasy, Bones of Ragnvald. This mod is pretty damn amazing for a single reason. It's strongly story-driven. A nice change from Sandbox. In this mod, we land in the realm of Ainur as it's torn between several factions, including an evil force to the north and a haunted forest to the west. In terms of gameplay and atmosphere, this reminds me a lot of World of Ice and Fire. But there's a creepiness to it that I can't fully describe. The world is very immersive and well polished, with new units as well as very nice scenery, from medieval castles to Roman architecture. I'm not gonna spoil the story for you, but it's pretty damn good. However, beware the haunted forest. Okay, yeah, nope, screw this, I'm out. Moving on, going somewhere very different now, Between Empires. In my previous video, I showed one mod based on the Wild West and another based on World War I, but here's a mod that overshadows it all. In this mod, we are taken to Europe between 1860 and 1914. What I absolutely love about this mod is, simply put, the immersion of battles. We even get to use artillery, which is insane for Warband. Talk about bending the mechanics to your will, and it's so awesome. And the battles, my god. However, as much fun as it is, battles are also pretty hardcore. The mechanics are a little confusing and take some getting used to. I got a couple of times that soldiers just charged and I wasn't able to call them back. At one point, an enemy army just dug in trenches and would not attack me, which is a prime feature of this mod, and the only way to make the battle progress was to advance right in front of their line and dig some trenches too. However, my soldiers didn't align it properly, and then they stood in front of it, and then they broke and fled. Come on. By the way, yes, your troops are far more likely to round mid-battles as compared to vanilla. What's great though is the mod allows you to start as the leader of a country. So of course I picked France. This way I can go straight to war, and I chose 1914 as my start of date, and the diplomatic situation is the same as World War I, and it makes for a great experience. Speaking of starting as a leader though, here's Out Caesar Out Nihil. If you want a mod featuring the Roman Empire, look no further. Acron is the Roman mod. Much like Between Empires, you get to start off as the Emperor of Rome, and Rome is actually at the peak of its power, owning France, Spain, and all of North Africa. So as the leader of Rome, you're free to expand your empire as you see fit, but also protect it, and improve it. You also start off with massive funds, a huge pool of soldiers, and a party size of 800, making it the largest I've ever seen in any mod. And while it retains many of the features I loved from Britannwalda, such as the siege planning method and battle formations, the main obvious feature of this mod is the intense micromanagement. Each town you have can build several key buildings simultaneously, you can enforce new laws at the cost of popularity, your towns could be exposed to plagues and fires. There's so much to do, it's right up there with Total War. In fact, the music is straight from Rome too. So if you're into Rome and want to do more kingdom management, this mod is the absolute best. And finally, my favorite mod of all the ones I tried so far is Nova Aedas. This one, much like Warsaw Conquest, was a huge surprise from playing years later after it got more time to develop. Nova Aedas takes us to Calradia, but during the Renaissance period. Guns are starting to appear, and armors are getting more sophisticated. Sceneries have also received massive upgrades, from town squares to cathedrals. There was also a serious attempt at making this mod canon to native, with the factions having evolved into several new ones, as well as ruins from battles that would have taken place around the time of the native game. But above all this, what I really like about Nova Aedas is that it gives us the ability to rise to power through very different means. Each town, for instance, has properties, which you can buy and rent out for a passive income, and with the Merchant Guild, you can learn a trade, such as blacksmithing, and open your own blacksmith, where, given the right materials, you can build your own weapons and armors, very similar to smithing in Bannerlord, and yet more complex. And finally, the coolest feature of this mod is colonization. Across the sea is a whole new continent, with lands that can be colonized. So sailing to the New World with ships and building materials, you can claim lands, build your settlements, and produce goods to sell back to Calradia. On top of that, there is an Aztec faction in the New World with their own scenery and weapons, as well as jungles to explore for treasure. Essentially, I feel Nova Aedas is like a spiritual sequel to Warband that manages to bring so many new things with updated visuals. I think I might put it right up there with my favorite mod, Perisno. They're very different from one another, but both succeeded in their aim spectacularly. And that's it for today. Again, if Pandora was your favorite, I apologize. But which mods were your favorites? Let me know in the comments, and while you're at it, if you have more recommendations, I could do a part 3. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Warband is unarguably the game I've played the most throughout my life, and that's mainly thanks to the huge community of modders that keep finding ways to push the boundaries of the game ever further. At this point I've made 2 videos showcasing my favorite mods, some I had played before, others recommended to me in the comments. And after getting several more suggestions, here we are again for part 3. Once again, I'm ranking them based on my personal preferences, so let's go. For starters, this one was a mixed bag. Meet Explorer. Rather recent, Explorer takes us back to Calradia, but with a very different approach. Instead of having a world map, Explorer has us play in a more traditional, open-world RPG style. We no longer have a world map to travel onto. Going from town to town now requires you to actually travel the land, where you'll come across villagers and bandits alike. We have a world map that tells us where we are, but the only way to find locations is to actually scout them or ask people passing by to give you info. Even in towns, there is no menu to access the market or the arena, you have to manually find them in the streets. While this may seem rather tedious to get around, the mod somewhat makes up for it with an interesting feature, that of the Raven. When pressing Y, we will take control of a Raven flying real fast that allows us to quickly survey the area. The Raven can also be used to quickly move across different regions. And that's pretty much it. The mod feels very experimental, so it's a very interesting mod if you wish to give Warband native a makeover. That said, I do feel it needs to be polished more. As a simple traveler, it took me a full hour of gameplay just to get from the Sirenet Desert to the Swadian border. That said, it makes for an interesting adventure. Because there is no longer a world map to interact with bandits, they will also just spawn at random whenever you reach a new area and attack you with full surprise. And looting is quite ridiculous. Instead of getting a full menu after the battle, dead NPCs will have small chests in front of them, and destroying them gets you the loot. And it's also a lot harder than it should be. Come on. Come on. On a different note, the scenery is quite nice. Calradia never looked so good. According to the mod page, the explorer approach results in sieges and battles being more intense, but I didn't go that far. The mod is daring, but for me personally, it's just not my thing. Up next, going to one of my favorite time periods, the Napoleonic Wars, with L'Aigle. L'Aigle takes us to Europe in 1809, where my man Napoleon rules over France at the peak of its power. So of course, amazing scenery, very good gun gameplay, and painfully realistic reloading animations. What I like about this mod is that by enlisting in the kingdom's army, you essentially become a general, free to command your own army, which, besides paying the hiring cost, you don't actually pay the soldiers, the kingdom does, so once hired, you don't have to worry too much about weekly payments. I really love the uniforms of the Grande Armée, the soldiers look so good, and so does Napoleon, they really nailed his appearance. However, the mod's biggest weakness is what should be its greatest asset, the battles. Forming up a line of infantry and seeing the line of smoke after the fire is pretty awesome. Having cannons is pretty good too, right up there with Between Empires. That said, there's a couple of problems. For starters, most standard muskets are wildly inaccurate, soldiers can't move and reload at the same time, and the enemy AI doesn't use formations, he just charges. Adding all this up, the battles are weird. You can never line up too far from the enemy because the inaccurate muskets won't do anything. If you order your men to charge, they'll stop moving as soon as they have to reload, so they'll barely move forward at all, unless you tell them to hold fire. This makes the battles take way too long. Even in sieges, the scenery is awesome, but NPCs struggle to find the proper path, and here I tried to line up my troops past the main enemy trench, that was just a big mess. Visually, L'Aigle is an awesome mod, but the gameplay feels a bit clunky to say the least. Still recommend, but manage your expectations. Up for a crusade? Meet In the Name of Jerusalem. Of course, with a game about knights and swords, you're gonna have tons of mods featuring the Crusades, but In the Name of Jerusalem strikes me as the most intense. In this mod, we're taken to 1187 in the Holy Land, right as Salah ad-Din is about to retake Jerusalem from the Crusaders, leading to the historical Third Crusade. There is a strong focus on historical accuracy, as every lord is a historical character, so of course I fanboyed on my man Salah ad-Din and joined the Saracens. In terms of actual changes to the gameplay though, there's a few, but it's subtle. What I like most is that troops are far more likely to rout. Even alone against bandits, killing half of them will make the rest of them run away. Definitely adds more to the realism. Sieges are also different, with not just new sceneries, but new animations, such as a battering ram and a ballista, though the controls are terrible at best. However, recruiting troops is confusing. I think you're supposed to be made a lord before you can actually recruit from villages, so I got stuck hiring very expensive mercenaries from towns, which wasn't ideal. All in all though, if you want the most immersive crusade experience, In the Name of Jerusalem is for you. And in a similar thematic, if you're looking for the most immersive Middle Ages mod, here's 1257 Anno Domini. As far as Middle Ages mods go, there isn't a lot to complain about here. In 1257 AD, the map stretches from North Africa to Scandinavia and the coast of France to Moscow and beyond. The mod also allows you to start off as a ruler, so I became a sultan. The immersion is excellent, from new sceneries to historical weapons and armors. But also, Battles are hardcore. With hundreds of troops in each parties, they make for some of the largest battles I've ever fought. However, in terms of innovation, there isn't a whole lot. This becomes painfully evident in sieges. They're about the same as native, so if you enjoy both sides fighting over a single choke point till one side is all gone, expect a lot more of that and then some. Because armies and garrisons are so large, this makes sieges painfully long. At least they also brought the body slide feature similar to diplomacy from my previous video. So, if you like the Crusades, but more broadly the Middle Ages, 1257 AD is basically In the Name of Jerusalem, only far bigger. Let's head more into fantasy now, with Fantasy Calradia. If you're looking for a mod that brings magic, but don't want to stray too far from native, this mod is for you. Fantasy's goal is just that, bring fantasy to Calradia, thanks to the new factions such as orcs, elves, and the undead. Besides those new factions and the new units and weapons that come with them, the main feature of the mod is the ability to use spells. Heading into magician guilds in key towns, we can buy magic spells and books, which can then be deployed in battle, such as a magical sword and fireballs. And of course, many troops are also spellcasters, so it makes for visually entertaining battles. And that's pretty much it, really. This is a fun mod to try out if you're new to fantasy mods. Up next, Paradigm Worlds. If I could sum up this mod in 2 words, it would be existential dread. If you thought Warsaw-Conquest was doing fantasy hardcore, boy have you seen nothing yet. According to the text during character creation, Paradigm World is set in the year 5000. Or is it 6000? You can actually choose between different time periods, but anyway, the game is set on Earth, but in a post-apocalyptic future resulting from biowarfare started by Vladimir Putin. It's also, based on the mod page, meant to be an artistic experiment. So, going into the mod, the amount of diversity in the species and weapons and armors meant I was almost immediately completely overwhelmed. I mean it, just what the hell is going on? I have a plasma gun, a medieval helmet, and whatever that is for a horse. I'm getting attacked by a skeleton wearing a bulletproof vest. Is that a snowmobile? Yes, yes it is, and it totally behaves like a horse, like, what? Okay, this village is under attack by vampire-cursed maidens. Can't be that bad, right? Oh my god, why are they so fast? And what's with the music? Why is there a dial sound effect when I swing my weapon? Feeling overwhelmed yet? All of these glimpses were in the first hour of me playing this mod, and quite frankly, that was the most I could digest in that moment. To be honest, I really love the concepts in Paradigm Worlds, but I think this is a mod that needs to be approached slowly, in small increments, before we get the full picture. Given that it was an artistic experiment, one could argue the experiment went really far. If fantasy isn't enough for you, you need chaotic fantasy, Paradigm Worlds is a must-try. And finally, going back to more familiar ground in fantasy, the last days of the Third Age. Besides Prophecy of Pendor, this is also the most recommended mod in my comments. The Last Days takes us to Middle-earth from Lord of the Rings. Although I'm not a big fan of Lord of the Rings myself, I have to acknowledge a solid mod when I see one, and a solid mod this is. You can either join the forces of good or evil, which gives you access to different species and kingdoms. Although it retains a lot of the freedom Warband gives us, it's also very story-driven, as it literally takes the story from the books and movies, with cutscenes to boot. I think The Last Days covers about everything you'd expect from a mod about Lord of the Rings, from all the species, weapons and armors, some epic battles, as well as some amazing scenery. However, it strikes me as a very hard mod to play also. One of the most distinct features is the currency. Instead of making money, we gain reputation points based on where we are in the world. Each kingdom has its own reputation points, meaning you could do a whole lot for one kingdom and get to recruit their soldiers and buy their gear, but going to another kingdom where they don't know you, you'll have no currency. I think the point is to incentivize the player to stick to the kingdom they start with, which in itself isn't too bad, but it's also very restrictive. That said, if you like fantasy mods and especially love Lord of the Rings, look no further than the last days of the Third Age. And that about wraps it up. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, I got other mods video on my channel, as well as more coming in the future. And if you feel nostalgic, also check my classic game series for all the amazing games from my childhood that you totally forgot about. Again, thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about a mod for Warband that was recommended to me several times in previous videos, Age of Sword and Sorcery. This is a mod that boasts a lot, from a Renaissance era to guns and magic. So after covering mods from Battleworld for a while, I'm back to Warband for some more quality content. Now, on to Age of Sword and Sorcery. So right off the bat, the character creation format is a little different, with each option giving certain bonuses. Ironically, when creating my character, I decided to start from nothing, with my parents being a drunk and a harlot, respectively, so I didn't have any bonuses. But by choosing different options in a second character, I ended up with a lot more skills initially, as well as some money and gear, so not too bad. And here we are. The mod takes place in the fictional world of Euros, which is obviously inspired by Europe. I like the map though, lots of islands, which isn't something we see often. Technology-wise, this is clearly the Renaissance, as the beautiful weapons and armors can tell. Going into simple arena sparring, I was so happy to see the fighting animations from Teleberia and Outcaesar on the Hill. Seriously, this fighting animation is so much better than native, I can't get enough of it. Typically when I play a new mod, I like to start as a solo adventurer to explore the mod features before starting a warband, and what I quickly realized is that in Age of Sword and Sorcery, there's quite a few interesting features. So let's start with the guilds. In each town we can go to the guild quarter. In this area we have several guilds: merchants, hunters, mercenaries, wizards, and assassins. Heading into the Huntsman Guild, we can join the guild, then complete quests for prestige. Each guild has its own prestige as a form of currency, which can be used to buy unique items as well as units for the warband. On 2 occasions, the Huntsman Guild has sent me to kill dangerous wild animals, first a bear and then some wolves. I think they need a little more work though. With the prestige earned, I bought a wolf for my party, but seeing how easy they were to dispatch in battle, I got rid of it immediately, as I doubt they're very effective. As a mount though, it would be pretty awesome. Wizards can be joined, but only if you reach a certain level of magic, which I don't have. I'll get to the magic in a minute though. In the Merchants Guild, mainly we can just buy a lot of goods, there's even a stock exchange to invest money and get more later, so it's good for passive income. The Assassins, or Thieves or whatever, there wasn't a lot going on, except that they have a brothel. And yes, I'm gonna have to blur that. And while the Mercenary Guild is there, it's still a work in progress, there's nothing to do. All of these guilds are in every town, so it's easy to grab a few quests on the side to complete when convenient. Outside of the guilds though, there are a lot of dungeons to explore, most of which are caves with enemies to kill and chests to open. Dungeons are fun and bring a lot of unique gear. In terms of main features, these are the main ones I found: dungeons and guilds. Both can offer very good gear, and it seems like an easy way to level up when starting the game. In terms of combat, besides the fighting animations, we also have guns. Early models, mostly arquebus, they're pretty deadly and fairly fast to reload. And then there's the magic, which is actually very simple to use. All you need is a staff and a spell. Equip them in the inventory, and you're good to go. In terms of actual spells, I haven't seen much. Mostly it's either a poisonous gas or some lightning bolts. The staff can't be used for melee though, so it's important to have a backup. You can also get spellbooks to increase your magical skills through the camp menu, though I haven't went that far myself, at least not yet. And finally, potions. It's actually pretty cool to see potions in a mod. Potions are cheap, somewhat easy to find, and can be equipped in combat for a one-time use. And in terms of playing as a solo adventurer, that's pretty much it. Guns, magic, dungeons, potions, and guilds. Already it brings quite a lot of variety. As you start building a warband, the process is pretty much the same as vanilla, though this is where the Renaissance vibe truly shines. I love the armors, as well as the new postures. The pikemen and musketeers look pretty awesome. In battle, there's also an option to have siege engines, though again I could not figure out how to do it. But in battle with another army, they had a trebuchet throwing rocks at my troops, and it looks pretty awesome. Just gonna figure out how to get those myself. And while all of the changes mentioned so far are pretty good, as part of this review, this is all the positive stuff I have to say. So now let's talk about the negatives. The biggest one I think is that the battles are still limited in size to native, which is painful. Here, two kingdom armies clashed 1000 against 1000, and I was hyped to experience this mod in all its glory. But battles are limited to about 100 troops on each side, meaning lots of engagement to clear a battle. And by a lot, I mean over a dozen rounds. Eventually it was taking so long, I ended up just knocking the whole army out just to get it over with. Seriously, this needs to change. At least allow for unlimited waves like Paris know, it would make all the difference in the world. Sieges also didn't change from native at all, with the exception of a major bug. Some castles, the walls were not loaded properly and it led to some ridiculous moments. Look here, there's supposed to be a wall, my troops are going up the ladder and just staying there. Unable to defend the walls, the enemy garrisons is just walking in a big circle. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Wasn't like that in all of the sieges, but still. It's like at best we get native sieges, at worst some buggy messes. As far as Warband goes, troops are somewhat cheap and easy to upgrade, but I haven't seen many spellcasters, so it's like, cool, the mod has magic, but with so few troops even casting spells at all, what's the point? And as far as becoming a ruler goes, it's pretty much what you'd expect. You have the diplomacy mod giving you a treasurer, the constable, and the chancellor for kingdom management, but as far as kingdom management goes, there's nothing else. Even improvements in towns are limited to native improvements. The one thing that seems cool though, via the camp menu, is the ability to customize all of your troops from their names to their gear, and that looks promising. In conclusion, Age of Sword and Sorcery has invested a lot in the solo experience. The addition of magic and potions mixed with guns and other Renaissance weaponry truly makes for a unique Warband experience. However, in the current state, the mod is still limited by the native features, especially when it comes to battles, sieges, and kingdom management. Is this the final version though? No. According to ModDB, this is still early access. However, the last update was November of last year. I don't know if the modder is still working on it, or when another version is gonna come out, but assuming some improvements are brought to battles and sieges, Age of Sword and Sorcery could easily become one of the top mods for Mount & Blade Warband. What do you think of Age of Sword and Sorcery? And what other mods would you recommend I try out? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm looking at a mod for Mount & Blade Warband that is so good, so unique, that I feel a little embarrassed about never having played it before. I'm of course talking about Light and Darkness, Heroes of Calradia. As the title suggests, it takes us to Calradia, but there's quite a big twist on it. So let's go. Starting the game, the character creation menu is quite different. Rather than choosing a background for yourself, the game will ask you about your personal values. I suspect this shapes somewhat how the game plays out, but it's too early to tell. So in this mod, as the cutscene shows it here, Calradia was once conquered by an evil force of darkness, until a hero united the land and liberated it. This hero became the first ruler of the Calradian Empire, which collapsed into rival kingdoms as soon as this hero died. Going to the present, we have more or less the native kingdoms from Warband, but the evil forces have been defeated centuries ago, but much like in Lord of the Rings, they will soon rise again to attack Calradia. Our character starts off in the new settlement of Zeldar, a neutral town on the northern Vaegir kingdoms, and we're immediately tasked with hunting down river pirates. From here, I don't want to spoil the story for you, but essentially, your hero will go from helping the locals against bandits to facing pilgrims of the darkness, leading us on a path to finding out just what dangers are coming to Calradia, while also making friends along the way. The story is what makes this mod so refreshing from native. While it doesn't take us to a new world, as most total conversions do, the storyline is central to the game. 3 hours into it, and I'm still just following the main quest. And what is really nice about it is that every companion from native makes an appearance with a key role in the story. Borcha, for instance, who was the horse thief in native, got himself arrested after stealing a lord's horse, and you have to bail him out of jail when you need a guide to travel across Calradia. Emira is rescued from a group of darkness pilgrims who killed her family, and she begs to tag along. Rolf, who in native is a bandit claiming to be a noble, is now a descendant of the hero that saved Calradia, and is looking to save Calradia again. We often have exchanges with all of the heroes as the story progresses. It's basically like creating your own Fellowship of the Ring, and the new spin on the characters was actually really well done. For the story-driven nature of the mod alone, this is a hard recommend. Outside of the story though, there's still several cool changes to the game. For starters, you're playing on the Calradia map from the original Mount & Blade game, which I don't mind at all, makes traveling a lot less tedious than it used to be. The only downside is the Serenade faction no longer exists. The mod also introduced many features for combat, such as the energy bar. While pressing left alt, we can now sprint at the cost of energy, which regenerates over time. We can also press Y to call our horse back to us in combat. That's pretty neat. On the world map, we can travel faster with the Forced March feature, which costs party morale. This could be pretty useful if your big warband can't catch up to a smaller group, for example. Pretty sure this isn't the only mod to do this, but there is a feature in battles that allows for enemies to surrender when they start losing. This is also very useful instead of running after the last few remaining enemies from across the map. There is some fantasy elements, of course. Throughout the game, we can collect magical orbs, which can be fused into weapons to give bonuses. So far, I've mostly fought humans, but I also fought giant trolls here and there. I've also met a few mysterious characters that use magic in combat. Like I said, this isn't a review of the story itself, so I'm trying to avoid spoilers. Mainly I wanted to talk about this mod because of how nice it is. That said, right now, I only have one main criticism, and it's the grinding nature of the missions themselves. For instance, it happens quite often that in order for the story to progress, we have to hunt bandit groups down. First we have to destroy 20 groups of river pirates, then 10 groups of darkness pilgrims, 10 groups of forest bandits, 10 groups of dark hunters. It's very repetitive. And it doesn't help that sometimes, thanks to native Calradia's battle map generator, I often found myself fighting bandit groups over very steep hills. It's annoying as hell. But still, if you're looking at a mod that doesn't take you far away from native, but brings in a rich narrative and some low fantasy elements, then Light and Darkness, Heroes of Calradia is for you. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the content, go ahead, like and subscribe so I can make money off my videos. Come on. Okay, I'm done. See you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. You know, I love Warband mods. Whether they take you to a different time period, a different world, or bring new gameplay mechanics, it's no wonder I've spent so much damn time playing Warband. But sometimes, it's nice to play mods that don't take you too far from home. So today we're looking at ambitious mods that still take place in the native world of Calradia. Before we start though, did you know that for all the Warband content I've produced so far, I've never been paid a single cent? That's because YouTube doesn't let content creators monetize their videos until they reach 1,000 subscribers, and damn it, I'm so close. So if you enjoyed this video or any of the many videos on my channel, then please subscribe to the channel so that I can eventually monetize. Thank you very much, and on to the video. Usually when I make these videos, I like to rank the mods based on personal preference, but because many of these mods are very similar to one another, I instead decided to share with you my favorite Calradian mods based on certain categories: best story driven, best improvements, best of different time periods, as well as a few honorable mentions at the end. So let's start with best improvements. In this category I share mods that aim to improve upon native Calradia by adding some mods, but don't really do anything to change core native. Generally the factions and the NPCs are more or less the same, and so is the map. Such mods that I personally enjoy include Native New Design, Banner Page, Diplomacy for Let Them Reloaded, and Flores Evolved. Which mod you end up playing will most likely depend on the slightest of changes brought to the mods that you prefer the most. Virtually all of them add diplomacy, the same mod settings for battles, including pre-planning. They pretty much all add new items to the game and revamp the troop trees for the factions to some extent. To really compare these mods and see which you might like the most, I suggest you look at each mod DB page for the full list of features. Each mod has its own article on it. I personally love Native New Design because it lets you be a ruler of an entire faction from the start. The option in Banner Page only gives you one settlement and one vassal. I did love Diplomacy Le Dum in its new sound effects though. It has epic siege towers too. Flores boasts the ability to have players join your battles in single player campaigns, which does sound pretty awesome. But again, when you have several mods attempting to reach the same end, they're all going to be pretty similar. I can't pick one over the other. Up next, let's talk about story-driven mods. Of mods taking place in Calradia, I found 3 and they're all pretty good: Asgard, Story of Calradia, Evlat, and Light and Darkness, Heroes of Calradia. Asgard has you start as the sole survivor of Asgard, a village near Praven. The first part of the story is focused on getting vengeance for the loss of your family at the hands of Krykon, a powerful raider with a large army. In order to track Krykon down, we have to meet a bunch of people and complete more quests, which in turn give us magical weapons. Overall, Asgard is pretty good and leads you to become a lord over time. I don't want to spoil it obviously, but there's a lot of cool segments. My only main criticism is the terrible spelling. Someone knew how to mod, but not how to write. Hey you, can you help me? Sorry, I'm busy. Jesus. A lot of dialogue feels very robotic to say the least, and sometimes it just reads weird. Hurry up, boy! Okay, sir. But honestly, it's the only issue I have. The mod makes a bunch of changes to the game, such as new sound effects, the same as Diplomacy let them, and I love it. And the unique magical weapons that you unlock are pretty awesome too. Evlat has you start as a former adventurer coming out of retirement. You have 2 fully grown children as your companions, which is pretty cool. And all the native companions know you personally and can offer unique quests. The main story is not as engaging as Asgard and Light and Darkness, at least initially, but it will keep you busy for a long time. And the mod offers new weapons and armors, as well as new bandits, new music, and flying carpets. That's right, there are dream sections where you can fly on a carpet and fight enemies. It's surprisingly fun. This mod is pretty awesome, but to know more, you'll have to play it yourself. And finally, Light and Darkness, Heroes of Calradia isn't just the best story-driven mod in Calradia, it's one of my favorite story-driven mods, period, along with Bones of Ragnvald. Light of Darkness takes you to Calradia as it appeared in the first Mount and Blade game. You initially help the town of Zendar fight off bandits, but the story quickly develops into saving Calradia from an evil cult. If you want to learn more about the mod, I made a dedicated video not long ago, link in the description. Now, let's talk about time period mods. For days, I mean any mod that takes us to Calradia, but at different times than the Middle Ages. So we have Nova Aedas, Calradia 1417, and Red Wars. It's not the first video in which I mentioned Nova Aedas. If you're not familiar, this is a mod that takes us to Calradia, but during the Renaissance. New scenery, beautiful music, new weapons and armors, but I especially love Nova Aedas because it's one of the few mods that give you several options to rise to power that don't include going to war. Such options include buying up properties and renting them out, learning new trades in the merchant guild, to then open up businesses. And best of all, there's a whole new continent at the edge of the map with an Aztec faction, but also lots of empty lands where you can start colonies, produce goods, and sell them back to Calradia. Because of the sheer variety brought by this mod, Nova Aedas is one of my favorite mods, period. But if you like the Renaissance period but aren't interested in all that variety, then I recommend Calradia 1417. It's essentially the Renaissance, same time period as Nova Aedas, but without any of the complex management stuff. It's a pretty good mod that distinguishes itself in 2 main ways: bandit castles and Easter eggs. The bandit castles, or barren keeps, are essentially bandit lairs which can be attacked. Mind you though, the rogue knights guarding them are pretty nasty. I was given the impression that we can keep the castles after taking them, and while technically we can, they don't generate any revenue and can't be used to start a faction. However, if you keep them, you can recruit soldiers or grab goods produced weekly to sell them. So it's cool as a source of mercenaries and goods to sell for a profit, but I just wish we could do more with them. But if there's one thing I really like about the mod though, it's all the Easter eggs. Throughout Calradia, you can come upon characters from a wide range of different games, movies, and even history. So far, I've met Duncan the Tall from the Game of Thrones book, we got Priscilla from The Witcher playing in a tavern, I also met Joan of Arc, Boudica, and in one tavern, if you look through the slightly open door, you can catch Cersei and Jaime from Game of Thrones just having a good time. On the world map, we also have the destroyed town of Zendar. If you talk to someone inside, the story they tell about finding off river pirates is a direct reference to Light and Darkness, though Zendar itself was also the starting point in the first Mount and Blade game. To recap, I prefer Nova Aedas personally, but if you don't like the extra layers of management, Calradia 1417 might just suit you better. And then we have Red Wars. This mod takes us to Calradia in the 1920s. The mod strongly emphasizes the radical political movements around the time of World War I with fascists and communist states. So the scenery is quite amazing, and because it's the 1920s, we don't really have armor anymore, it's mostly uniforms and suits. Swords are replaced with firearms, from handguns to machine guns. Overall, the mod is pretty good, the only problem is, it was never finished. Some scenery is still native Calradia, which makes sieges very unbalanced. And in battles, because the guns are very accurate, it makes more sense to line up your troops far away from the enemy and just exchange fire. This actually makes the battles painfully slow. but still, using guns is pretty good and the uniforms are pretty neat. And so are the giant statues of Lenin. I ain't complaining, this mod is pretty cool. And that leaves us with a few honorable mentions, mods that don't stand in any given category. For starters, we have Explorer. Explorer is Warband with one major difference. There is no world map to travel onto. This means as an adventurer, you're supposed to physically travel across Calradia to get anywhere. This effectively makes the game steer away from its usual gameplay mechanics to instead focus solely on the traveling. Calradia is split into many sections. Through each, you will come across peasants, caravans, and warbands, as well as bandits. And bandits give no warning, they just attack. To make traveling easier, the mod comes with the Raven feature, similar to Assassin's Creed's Valhalla. It allows you to travel much faster. So for what the mod intended to do, it's actually very well done. But it's not my own taste personally. I find the traveling to be very grindy, but it might just be an experimental mod worth trying, just for fun. Fantasy Calradia is just that, it's a mod that adds fantasy to Calradia. Bandits are largely replaced by non-human species like ghouls and orcs. Faction troop trees have been revamped to include spellcasters, and you yourself can also fight using spells. The mod certainly makes for quite the visual spectacle when you got magicians in open battles, but outside of that, the mod doesn't do much. As far as fantasy mod goes, there are plenty I find better, but I'd give credit to Fantasy Calradia as a good mod to start playing fantasy mods. It's a good introduction, basically. And for the perverts among you, you can always play Diplomacy. This mod is much smaller to previously mentioned mods in that it adds a bunch of sub-mods to native Calradia, but there are two distinct additions. The first one being a repolished map. Calradia never looked so good. But as the title suggests, this mod's main thing is not safe for work. You can hook up with lords, ransom people in taverns, you can even pimp your companions, and you'll be treated to some graphic scenes which, no, I will not show. Go see for yourself if you want to. And that's pretty much it for today. Thanks for watching, everyone. Oh, and in my defense, I did not learn of this last mod until someone mentioned it in my Discord server. If you want to give me your equally enlightening recommendations for future videos, feel free to join the server. Link in the description. Thank you all again, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Today we're taking a look at Age of Arthur. This is an ambitious Warband mod that was recommended to me several times in the comments of my videos. So, is it any good? If you enjoy the content, feel free to support the channel with a like and subscribe, I truly appreciate it. Now let's go! Starting a new game, it becomes very apparent what this mod aims to do. First thing we notice, this is like 90% of the map of Britannwalda. In fact, the mod page states that this mod takes place 150 years before Britannwalda. So, to talk about Age of Arthur, we first need to talk a bit about Britannwalda, the mod Age of Arthur is based on. And if you're not familiar with this mod, oh man. To sum it up, this is arguably one of the best mods in Warband. Britannwalda took us to the Dark Ages in the UK. It has tons of features designed to make the game hardcore, such as passive bleeding in battles, injuries that can permanently lower your stats, stamina, and breakable weapons. But most memorably for me, it redid the entire siege mechanics by making it possible to starve castles out rather than assault them. It was so good, in fact, that the modders teamed up with the Warband developers to release a paid DLC, Viking Conquest. So it becomes evident that any mod that uses Britannwalda as a canvas, like Age of Arthur right here, should be pretty awesome, right? Well, yeah, and no. It really depends on what features you add, what features you keep, and which one you remove. First, the map. Like I said, it's virtually the same, with the exception of northern France. Though to be honest, the British Isles made for quite a huge map as it is, so I don't think adding France was necessary. In the mod settings, we can find most of the settings from Britannwalda, like bleeding and stamina. So far so good, but broadly speaking, here's how Age of Arthur changes from Britannwalda. First, there's magic. There is an option to enable magic in the game, but I'm not big on magic, so it won't impact me. But even without enabling it, you will come upon witches in certain missions that use fire spells. Speaking of missions, there's a unique storyline. As the name of the mod suggests, King Arthur as well as Merlin and the Knights of the Round Table are all in the mod. In fact, King Arthur and the Kingdom of Camelot are in the thick of it, in southern England. You can interact with all of the characters and occasionally get unique quests and items from them. There's also new quests as a whole. Lords, ladies, villages, there's a whole bunch of unique quests to do. It definitely gives Britannwalda a breath of fresh air. What I do like though is the mod puts a lot of emphasis on culture and religion. Much like in Brittenwalda, you can either be a Christian or a pagan, but the mod improved upon this by tying the religions to certain cultures. If you're a Christian, going into pagan areas, you won't be welcomed, and vice versa. There's also more religious spots on each side, both churches and pagan sites. If you were to pillage a pagan site using pagan troops, they will lose morale and disapprove of your actions. If you do it with Christian troops, they will approve of your actions and gain morale. And Christian lords will praise you for building churches on top of pagan sites. Some lords will also lose relations with you from the start if you come from a different culture. Selecting foreigner as a culture in character creation puts you as a Roman, and people will comment on it upon meeting you. This is a nice addition to the game, showing that wars can be fought not just between factions, but between religions. There's also a lot of work put into the sea gameplay. While Brittenwalda introduced seafaring and ship battles, Age of Arthur allows you to build ships of different sizes using different materials. You can also own several ships, making it a fleet. The game also brought in a feature from 1257 AD, that of building your own villages, which can then turn into towns. This can be a way of starting a faction without even going to war with anybody. It also added the possibility of having children, dying yourself, and then playing as one of your children. Battle-wise, this is pretty much the same as Brittenwalda, with a strong emphasis on shield wall warfare. However, decapitations are on a whole new level. Whoa! But the mod isn't perfect. My first criticism is the generally unclear way in which you have to complete quests. For instance, one of the biggest quests involves a fight with Queen Mob. After the first fight, you're prompted to seek out Merlin, but Merlin does not appear in the list of characters. It's only when I looked up online that I found out I have to first find the Kingdom of Camelot, King Arthur, then wait for him to go inside a town or castle, and Merlin will be chilling in the hall. To defeat Mob, we have to find a whole bunch of relics, but again, the directions are pretty damn vague sometimes. Thankfully there's a complete guide on how to find the relics online, but the fact that I have to follow it all should be a sign that it's not super clear. And honestly, given how ambitious this mod is, hearing the native music is really lame. Like, come on, even Brittenwalda just removed it. But my biggest criticism is the siege mod. They did do a few cool tweaks. For some events like ambushing the garrison, you have to lead the ambush yourself. The siege camp scenery has also been redone. Neat. There's just two big problems. First off, the mod reset castle and town's food stores to their native capacity. In Brittenwalda, it was possible to starve garrisons out because they only had like 2 weeks worth of food at most. But in Age of Arthur, it's well over 3 months of food, so even after encircling a town, burning the farms and destroying parts of their food, they still had like 50 days worth of food and refused to surrender. This simple change essentially rendered the whole siege planning mechanic useless, and it wasn't just one castle. I besieged several and they all had 100 days worth of supplies. Why on earth would you set it this way? And depending on which castle you attack, prepping for an assault has also been improved by using a battering ram to attack the castle through the main gate. To be honest, I'm happy not to be stuck on ladders for half an hour, but again there's a few problems. The pathfinding is a mess for the troops. On one occasion, some archers spawned on the walls, but there was no actual means to get on the wall, so my troops got stuck in front of the wall trying to get to the archers instead of charging through the gate. On another occasion, enemy troops were chilling on the side of some stairs instead of going up. My troops were staying on the stairs, staring at the enemy, until they were all killed by archers. So, Age of Arthur is a bit of a mixed bag. I'm glad they attempted to bring a storyline to Brittenwalda by adding the legend of King Arthur. It's a very good match. The new layer of culture and religion is also very cool. But at the same time, don't fix it if it ain't broken. They completely screwed up the siege mechanic, which was the main thing I loved so much about Brittenwalda in the first place. But assuming you never really cared about that, I'd say Age of Arthur is actually really good. Basically Brittenwalda with a story, some magic, and a whole bunch of new features like having children. If you're looking for a refreshed Brittenwalda, Age of Arthur is for you. And that's it for today. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Ever since I first released my first Warband mod video, I've been swarmed with requests to try others. As a result, I made 2 more mod videos and then another one where I basically ranked all of the mods I had played so far based on certain categories. But even then, the suggestions did not stop. I ended up doing 3 individual reviews of certain mods, as well as a Calradia edition. But even so, there are still recommendations that I missed. So basically, I went through all of my videos' comment sections, and I looked for all of the suggestions I might have missed, and finally, I have enough recommendations to do a favorite mod videos part 4. Now let's do this. For the first one, I'll be honest, this one will probably need its own review. I can't say yet if it's good or bad because I got overwhelmed just trying to play it. This is Tainted Paths. For starters, it's undeniable that this mod is very ambitious. The map not only covers Europe, Asia, and North Africa, but also offers to play in different time periods, either the Middle Ages or the Renaissance, or mixed, apparently. But starting the mod, it immediately got confusing, as you have little choice to customize your character before you're thrown into a battle I'm guessing you're supposed to lose. And already the mod shows one of its biggest features, the new strategy menu. With this menu, it's possible to give very specific orders to very specific sets of troops. You could tell the heavy cavalry, for example, to target the enemy archers specifically, while telling your archers to attack the light infantry specifically. It seems interesting, but it's also very confusing. There's a steep learning curve ahead, for sure. Besides that, the game has a central quest in which I'm supposed to look for my sister after her village was burned down, but by now it's almost impossible to progress in the mod without immediately coming upon a change that's confusing. This is a town menu whenever you enter a town. Each part of the town can be visited separately, and there's way more to explore, but for what purpose? I'm not sure yet. There's a fighting ring somewhere where you can bet on NPCs, but going into the arena not only throws you straight into a tournament, but people are bringing in lethal weapons. Jesus! I'm also very confused with the party size. 40,000 in party size? It clearly doesn't work like that, but I'm also confused as to why my 10 soldiers are named armies, and NPC parties have thousands of troops. What is going on? I would love to learn more about this mod, but unfortunately the time it demands for me to learn it is just not in my time budget for this video. From what I can see so far, there's new battle mechanics and a lot more management stuff. If that sounds like something you'd like, the links to all the mods are in the description. The next mod is pretty good, but its biggest appeal is unfortunately lost on me. This is Skyrim Civil War. As the title suggests, this mod is a total conversion for Skyrim. Turns out it was taken down for copyright, but a Google Drive link for the mod still exists. So, we have the map of Skyrim as well as the factions and the weapons. While it strikes me as a pretty solid mod, at least visually, this is where I confess that I've had Skyrim in my library for over 2 years now and still haven't played it. So yeah, most of the appeal is lost on me. Are these characters from the game? How should I know? I do know that Skyrim lets you play as different races than human, and while the mod doesn't give you that option, you can buy certain armors that essentially give you the look of certain species, so there's that. And a lot of work went into the scenery, at least for the main towns. Does this look close to the original? No clue. But besides all that, there's really nothing much to say about this mod. It did a pretty good job of bringing the world of Skyrim to life, but there's virtually no change to the gameplay, no new quests that I found, tournaments are the same. But hey, if you like Skyrim, you might just like this mod. Let's move on to Hispania 1200. As the name suggests, this mod takes us to Spain and Portugal in the Middle Ages. The countries are torn between several Christian kingdoms in the north and a Muslim caliphate in the south. I was suspecting the mod to be fairly small, but props to the modders. Much like Bretonwalda, once you enlarge a country, you can definitely include a lot of settlements. The map is actually huge. Much like 1257 AD, this mod allows you to start as a king of any of those factions, so I chose the Kingdom of Castile, which is dead center, and I went straight to war against the Muslims, cause that's just what I do. Some cool things about the mod that I noticed was the over-the-top death sound effects. And the ability via the camp menu to basically talk to any lord even if you're not close to them. This is actually very useful, and I wish other mods would implement this. The mod brought new castle sceneries, and it certainly gives the game a feeling of wonder. Seriously, these castle designs are pretty impressive, and much like Gekokujo and In the Name of Jerusalem, siege mechanics are designed so that you don't spend the whole assault on a single choke point. Many castles actually have several layers of walls and defenses to get through, which is pretty cool. But broadly speaking, that's all there is to it. In terms of kingdom management, this is pretty much native. Diplomacy isn't implemented, so you can't hire extra staff members. There's a few new items, but I don't find them all that impressive, at least compared to native. So to recap, Hispania 1200 is pretty cool if you love this part of Spanish history. It's definitely immersive, and the ability to start as a ruler is always welcomed. But it doesn't really change anything to core native mechanics. Most of the changes are surface level. It's a good mod, but a light one. Next up, 180 euros. This one is based on the old Chinese novel Water Margin, of which I confess I know nothing about. So the mod takes us to feudal China, torn by several factions. It's got almost everything you would hope for in such a mod, cool Chinese armors and weapons, as well as scenery. For the most part, most towns still have native scenery however. In the mod, there is a strong emphasis on the 180 heroes, which are new companions. These companions will bring some new benefits, like the ability to build a better camp, for instance. Bandits groups are also much larger and have been revamped with new weapons and armors. The Sea Raiders, for example, are way tougher in this mod. But besides all that, the main focus of the mod is in the battle mechanics. There is an option to challenge an opponent to a duel at the beginning. These are pretty cool, but also get repetitive. Bandit parties have leaders though, and they're pretty tough, so some duels can be challenging. There's also a strong emphasis on morale, as the mod tells you constantly the current morale of your army, which is affected by casualties, though I don't know that it's that much different from native. This mod also comes with the Rage feature, which works as follows. When you fight, the Rage bar fills up, at which point you can toggle Rage. You'll start shining, and I'm guessing the stats are temporarily increased. Enemies and companions will do it as well. And like in the Light and Darkness mod, enemies will surrender when they are losing, which is just so convenient instead of running all over the map to catch up to them. There is a unique quest to the mod, which mostly comprises of fighting some bandits, challenging some lords to a duel, as well as mind reading apparently. Wasn't the most engaging storyline though, the bad spelling certainly doesn't help. But anyway, if you're looking for a cool Chinese mod with a central quest and a few cool additions to combat, 180 euros will do the trick. Next up, a very pleasant surprise, 16th Century. This mod takes us to planet Earth, and I have to say planet Earth because the map virtually covers all of it, from the American coast to Europe, Africa, and Asia. It's actually quite impressive how they managed to make the map so ambitious, and the effort went into the scenery and accessories as well, whether you're in Japan, France, or hanging out with the Aztecs. Virtually all factions bring in their own weapons, so you can just as easily be a samurai as you can be a conquistador. I was so impressed with the variety, I essentially spent the first hour of gameplay just exploring the world. Gameplay-wise though, it's about what you'd expect. Being set in the 16th century, we have guns. They're all fairly accurate, making them worthwhile, from muskets to double-barrel handguns. Neat. We even have some moderately powerful grenades. And with this, each faction come with their own gunner troops, and firing volleys are about as satisfying as you could hope for. Broadly speaking though, that's pretty much it. Sieges are still native, and battles are limited to native battle size unless you change it yourself with the battle sizer tool. One thing I like though, and I wish mods would add this more often, it's the ability to give money to villages to improve relations. Every time you improve relations, you get the option to recruit again. So you could technically get an entire warband from a single village, provided you have a lot of money. The downsides for the mod are minor, but nonetheless annoying. The main one is, markets are not optimized to sell culture-specific items. Going to Japan, you're just as likely to find a samurai suit of armor as some modern European knight armor. You might not even find katanas, you could get bastard swords instead. Same goes in Europe, items are very randomized, and typically, some of the top items are just way too expensive. Look at this one. Jesus! But in the end, 16th Century is basically a late Renaissance mod that covers all popular cultures of the time, and is one of the few mods that essentially makes it possible to conquer the entire world. Will you build a new world order? This one was also a nice surprise, Adventure in the East. This mod takes us to the early 600s, as the Roman Empire is about to be torn apart and powers in the Middle East are rising to challenge it. So the mod is very much set in the Middle East, with the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea on either side of the main land area. What I like about this mod though is that it offers a main story campaign instead of just the usual sandbox. In the story, your character essentially starts from nothing, but will soon start serving the local rulers and their plots to domination. These quests can be ignored as you wish though. For instance, I was asked on 2 occasions to attack Jewish caravans and refused both times, but following the story will ensure you get companions, level up, and eventually rise to power. And because it's the Middle East in the 600s, a lot of new gear for all the factions, as would be expected. In terms of mechanics though, there aren't many changes. One noticeable change is the possibility of rebellion starting in certain factions, which is interesting. But if you like this time period, or broadly the Middle East, and will enjoy a mod with a story to guide you, Adventure in the East is definitely worth a try. Similarly to Adventure in the East, here's Crusades and Jihads. Now, there's no shortage of mods centered on the Crusades, notably In the Name of Jerusalem as well as 1257 AD, which does cover the Holy Land as part of the broader content. Crusades and Jihads feels like Crusades made simpler, but nonetheless fun. The map is very similar to that of Adventure in the East. Also points for the music, it's real catchy. Also, like Adventure in the East, you have the option to do a story campaign rather than just sandbox. I would not say the story itself is particularly engaging, but it does have some pretty cool missions, which include infiltrating a town to sabotage the armory, then making your escape. In terms of battles, this is pretty much same old. There's some slight change in fighting animations that take getting used to, and some settings were imported from Brittenwalda, such as bleeding and decapitation. Besides that, just make sure to configure Warband as shown in the loading menu, cause otherwise this mod is really laggy. But overall, Crusades and Jihad is a pretty solid mod, definite recommend. And finally, my favorite mod for this new batch is also the hardest to pronounce, Suvarnabhumi Mahayuth. This mod takes us to Southeast Asia in the 16th century. The map covers Malaysia, as well as Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Malaysia at the time is currently split between the Spanish colony and the Caliphate in the south. So in addition to featuring Southeast Asian cultures, the mod also brings European and Muslim-style weapons and armors. As far as mod goes, this one is about as good as you would expect. Very immersive for the place and time period in every way. Guns are, as usual, a lot of fun. Bandits have a lot of variety, from rogue conquistadors to Japanese wacko pirates. I think the most impressive part about the mod though is the addition of war elephants. I've seen elephants in other mods, but this one managed it pretty good. For starters, they are way bigger, and they run over enemies with ease. It also makes seeing elephants charging at your line very unnerving. But between all of that, this mod effectively took a fascinating time period and place that really doesn't get enough attention, and succeeded in making it immersive and awesome to play. Of all the mods I've played, it was the most straightforward, but also the best made, and not too buggy either. My only issue is that I struggle to pronounce its name. And that's about it for today. As of making this video, I've played a whooping total of 40 total conversions for Warband. If you have more recommendations, now is the time, because in my next video I will be ranking all of them based on my personal preferences. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. For several months now, I've been getting requests to review all kinds of mods from Warband, but one mod that has been recommended to me several times and that I never tried until now is Viking Conquest. And the reason is that Viking Conquest is not technically a mod, it's a paid DLC. So for this video, I decided to actually buy Viking Conquest and play it for some time so I can tell you whether this is worth it or not. Now, let's head into the review. So, going to Warband's store page on Steam, we can see the Viking Conquest DLC. It costs about 17 Canadian dollars compared to Warband's $22. So, at full price, that's almost buying Warband all over again. But what do you get out of it? Well, Viking Conquest isn't just some random DLC. It was actually made in collaboration between Tell Worlds and the modders behind Brittenwalda. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you know Brittenwalda is one of my favorite Warband mods of all time. It's set in the UK during the Dark Ages, it adds tons of features meant to make the game more realistic and significantly more challenging. It's also one of the most known mods from Warband, and a few other mods proudly used Brittenwalda as a canvas to do their own thing. So Viking Conquest isn't something we see often in any game. This is basically what happens when a game's developer offers full technical support to a modding team to take their mod to the next level. So naturally, as I review Viking Conquest, I will be comparing it to its spiritual predecessor, Brittenwalda. On the surface, we get a few noticeable changes. Viking Conquest takes us not just to the UK, but also the coast of the Netherlands, Denmark, and Norway. So while it retains most of the map from Brittenwalda, as the title suggests, we also get some Norse factions with the proper gear that goes with it. The DLC also comes with slightly more polished graphics. The map is better detailed, as is the water texture. We get new skins for characters as well as dynamic hair, and a new weather system as well, which is pretty neat. Viking Conquest tends to be better looking than your average mod. Other than that, most features from Brittenwalda can also be found in Viking Conquest. We have similar shield wall tactics, troop trees have been revamped but are largely the same, and many mechanics are also available, such as stamina, bleeding, and wounds. Broadly speaking though, Viking Conquest has two main selling points, sea gameplay and an ambitious story mode. Let's first talk about sea battles. Brittenwalda had them, but it wasn't great. Viking Conquest improved upon the mechanics by making them far more stable. It's now possible to sail your ship in battle, changing directions, dropping down the sail, and boarding enemies. But for all of its appeal, I didn't find it all that great. For starters, it's not inherently better to fight at sea than fighting on land. It's more chaotic in nature as you struggle to coordinate your ships, but at least on land, you can take advantage of the terrain, and generally speaking, you can field a lot more troops and have far more decisive battles. But also, buying ships and repairing them is so expensive that the whole feature is barely accessible at all. Not only are ships expensive, but their capacity is limited, meaning you need several of them to travel with your whole warband. Thankfully, the game also adds the quarter feature, which can be used to leave troops on land without disbanding them when you need to travel by sea, but that also means that you travel with a limited amount of troops, and sea battles can be far more dangerous. So ultimately, sea battles aren't that cool, and most of the time they're too expensive to even experience at their fullest. The other main selling point is the story. I don't want to spoil it, but I'll say for me it was okay. What's really cool about the story mode is that you make a lot of choices throughout quests that will take the story in slightly different directions. And as in other story-driven mods, the story involves your companions a lot, and your relationship with them will impact how the story unfolds as well. So in terms of story-driven mod, it's definitely one of the strongest, better written stories you can experience in Warband. And having multiple endings to many quests mean there's a lot of replay value as well. That said, the story in of itself wasn't like super awesome or anything. The premise is decent, it involves a lot of historical events which you get to witness, but the ending for the character was a big meh. It was predictable, and ultimately unsatisfying for me personally. So, we have a DLC that slightly improves upon an already great mod, but seafaring is okay at best, too expensive at worst, and a unique story that will keep you engaged for a solid 15 hours, but may not be satisfying. So the ultimate question is Viking Conquest worth it? To me, it depends on what you compare it to. If you compare it to native Warband, Viking Conquest is a massive upgrade. Virtually everything is improved, from battle tactics, battle size, kingdom management, introduction of sea battles, a story mode campaign, improved visuals, new items, new factions. So yeah, it adds a lot. But if you compare it to the countless mods we can get for free, that $18 price tag becomes very hard to justify. In fact, comparing it side to side with Britannwalda, what more do we get from Viking Conquest? Besides the story mode, better sea battles, and Norse factions, the changes brought to Viking Conquest are subtle. How about being able to bang your shield with your army? That's cool, I guess. The siege gameplay, which is one of my favorite things from Britannwalda, is still there and largely the same. The main difference I noticed is that defending the siege camp is much better. In Britannwalda, there was an issue with reinforcements, and these battles could take forever. In Viking Conquest, the siege camp is located on top of a hill with a single entry point which can be defended effectively against larger forces. These battles are much bigger and are done much faster, so that's great. On a different note, Viking Conquest has a completely new soundtrack, which is definitely better than Britannwalda's Dark Ages vibe. The soundtrack though is very short and gets repetitive. Another point for Viking Conquest, it's far more stable. Must be one of the perks of having full technical support from the developer. Viking Conquest did not have any bugs, the only crashes I had was from setting battle size past what the game can handle. What I really hate though is how difficult Viking Conquest has made it to recruit and upgrade troops. It's stupidly hard. Firstly, you can't just get the recruiting option from the village menu. For every single village you go to, you have to directly ask the village leader permission to recruit volunteers. And virtually every time, the only way to guarantee their approval is to bribe them with 500 dinars. So every village has a fee of 500 before you even start recruiting. Great. Also, if you have scenic view turned on in the settings, you need to physically go to the village to find the leader to start talking to him, for every village. There's also an option to recruit troops from castles and towns, but you need at least 150 renowned, and you need a relationship of 5 with the ruling lord, which you can accomplish by either doing tasks for them, or bribing them with jewelry, which is very expensive. Compare that to Britannwalda, and you can just go to any village and start recruiting. That's it. There was an option to give money to the village, but that was optional, and giving money actually improved your relation with the village, which meant you could do it several times to recruit more, and as the relation keeps improving, you get more better recruits. To me, this is a perfect example of fixing something that wasn't even broken, and it became painfully clear during my story mode when I had to recruit more soldiers because they kept dying in a siege. The whole process was painfully slow, I would barely get any recruits from villages at all, and the cost was ridiculous. Now granted, I started a sandbox campaign and reduced the difficulty for recruiting and upgrading, and I noticed a difference. But even then, the way to recruit in Britannwalda was perfectly fine. Why make it more difficult for no reason, and then put a price tag behind it? And those are the main differences between Britannwalda and Viking Conquest. So once again I ask, is Viking Conquest worth it? And my answer is, Not really. From native to Viking Conquest, it's a massive upgrade for sure, but from free Britannwalda and countless other mods to a glorified mod that costs nearly as much as the base game, it's a very stable total conversion that brings a story mod and sea battles, but neither are big enough deals for me personally to pay $18 for it when there's so many other options for free. I spent hundreds of hours playing free mods that gave me unique experiences, and going back to them after playing Viking Conquest, I don't think I'm gonna find these free mods to lack in anything that Viking Conquest provided exclusively. Does that mean you should not buy the DLC at all? Well, there is a reason for me personally that I think if you can afford it, you should still consider it. And simply put, it's to support the modders. If there's one thing working on my YouTube channel made me realize, is that there's a huge community of passionate gamers who take the time to make mods for games with no other intention than to bring a new experience to players. Developers have an incentive to make games, they sell them, but 99% of modders never get paid for all the work they put into creating amazing mods. Britannwalda without a doubt took a lot of time to make, and I spent at least 300 hours playing it. I'm glad they were able to team up with Tailworlds to turn Britannwalda into something even bigger. So to me, buying Viking Conquest is my way to show support. I may not find its changes are worth the price, but it's nonetheless an improvement upon Britannwalda, so I doubt I'll be going back to it when I now have Viking Conquest. And ideally, I think we should all make an effort to show more appreciation to modders. That's why some of them have Patreon pages, or why Nexus Mods has an option to send tips. The only thing that bothers me is I want my money spent on Viking Conquest to go predominantly to the modders. But a few years ago, they had an AMA on Reddit and someone asked them if they were making money from the sale of the DLC, to which they replied that they could not share that information. So whether or not I'm supporting them as much as I want by buying the DLC, I'll never know for sure. So to recap, if you're hoping for a mod that's way up there compared to other mods, I don't think Viking Conquest really offers that, and I don't think the price is worth it. When on sale though, it's definitely more reasonable. If, however, you loved Britannwalda and want to experience it on a higher level, while simultaneously supporting the modders for all their hard work, then I can't think of a better way than to buy Viking Conquest. And that's about it for today. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Today we're looking at a mysterious mod from Warband which can be found neither on the ModDB page nor on the Steam Workshop. The mod is called Sparta, and from what I've been told, the fans of the mod have complained so much about how difficult it was to play this mod that it led to a big clash with the modder who decided to remove it altogether. So while the official links for the mods no longer exist, you can still find a version of it online if you're persistent enough. And I wasn't just about to ignore this mod. I want to know, is it really that hard? If you enjoy this content, you can support me with a like and subscribe. Thanks in advance, and on to the review. Sparta, as the title suggests, takes us to ancient Greece, with all of the historical city-states of the time, including the well-known Athens and Sparta. Right off the bat, the mod is very impressive visually. The scenery is simply beautiful, the music is spot on, and the armors are really badass. The mod is specifically set during the historical Peloponnesian War, which was a war fought between Sparta, Athens, and their respective allies. In fact, the mod relies heavily on history, not just for the factions, but also the fighting style and tactics of the time. So if you ever wanted to try out the phalanx formation in Warband, look no further. This looks amazing. I also love how the blocking animation was changed to fit the formation. This also means melee fighting is largely focused around fighting with a spear. It is the primary weapon for most units. The fighting mechanics are one of the first hints on the mod's difficulty. All you can really do with a spear is thrust. Instinctively, I wanted to switch to the sword, but swords are also historically short, which makes it difficult against other troops with spears, as they have a reach advantage. This also means cavalry as a unit is really not the main focus in this mod. Most fights are fought on foot. Archers are also largely replaced by slingers and peltasts, which are devastating at close range. So broadly speaking, if you love the time period, I'd say this mod is as immersive as it can be. In addition to the visuals, the mod also adds Freelancer, some extra layers of kingdom management, as well as sea battles, although I'll come back to those. But let's actually talk about the difficulty. Is this mod really as hard as people pointed out? Well, yes. The first thing people pointed out is that the game starts with a lot of large bandit groups, which, yes, as you can see here, you really have to be careful in early game. But also, the bandits are stupidly powerful in this mod. First thing I noticed, the AI is much smarter. They are advancing in phalanx instead of randomly charging like looters. This is a recurrent theme. Not only are bandit groups large, they are actually very disciplined. And they are also very overpowered. Even as I chose to cheat and get myself a lot of soldiers, I would outnumber bandits by over 100 men and still have massive casualties. Now, you might be thinking just go in the options and reduce damage taken, but the mod doesn't let you do that. If you change it, it resets itself automatically. That's both for you and your troops, so a lot of times having a lot of troops doesn't matter. This also means you can get insta-killed, as happened to me several times. Even with the heaviest set of armor, the damage taken is huge. So early game in Sparta is very difficult. You could be killed with a single blow, and bandit groups are large and numerous. But there's also a lot of smaller ways in which the mod is made difficult. Recruits are fairly available and cheap, but they also come with very low skills and gear. There is no trainer perk, so there's no way for troops to passively gain XP outside of battles. The size of parties and garrisons have also been increased drastically, meaning you'll need a lot of troops to get anything done. Even the engineer perk has been reduced. At 7 points in engineering, it still takes me more than a day to set up ladders in a siege. Can't imagine how long it would take if I had no skills at all. So basically, you take a mod that removes the ability to reduce damage in a menu, makes bandits far more numerous and smart, make armors crazy expensive, new recruits very weak and increase party size to the extreme, and you basically get Sparta. Yes, it's a very difficult mod, and not, I think, in a good way. The mod does warn that it's for veteran Warband players, but here's the thing. Why hide an amazing mod set in a fascinating time period behind a layer of extreme difficulty? You could say mods like Britanwalda do the same, by adding permanent wounds and such, but at least these options can be disabled for anybody that doesn't want a punishing experience. So I understand why people criticize Sparta for not making these changes optional as well. That's not to say that the mod would be perfect otherwise, because there are still some issues. Mostly stability. The modder provided a guide on how to set the graphics to avoid crashes, but I still had several of them. No one is safe from the occasional crash, I suspect. But also, because armies are huge, so are battles, and while the phalanx looks amazing, the battles themselves are fairly slow as a result. Troops stay in formation and just advance on one another. You could set the battle size higher to make battles go faster, but even in a battle that involves thousands of troops, it will still be very grindy. It doesn't help that battle maps are often too big, and the terrain very uneven. We're talking about a mod focused on the phalanx, right? Greeks fought on flat terrain, so I feel annoyed at the frequent steep hills. The same goes for sea battles. I think it's really cool that the mod has a scenery for sea battles with all the ships stuck into one another. However, the maximum spawn amount is 40 troops on each side, so 400 against 400? That's 10 rounds of fighting the same fight. It's grindy as hell. Props to sieges though that feel more like Gekokujo and Hispania 1200. Several layers of defense, sometimes without a wall defense at all, just charging into the streets. I'll take sieges like that any day. So to conclude, Sparta is a fairly cool mod with its pros and cons, and yes, it probably is one of the most difficult mods to be found on Warband. If that's your thing, definitely recommend. If you like ancient Greece, this is also very immersive, but like any mods, there's flaws to be expected. As I've said at the beginning of this video, this mod is no longer available on the official websites, but good news, I left the Google Drive link of the version that I currently own in the video of the description, and it will stay there until, I'm guessing, the modder reaches out to me to tell me to take it out, which I don't know if it will ever happen, so in the meantime, just enjoy the mod. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. You read the title, you know what it's about. The Reckoning is a post-apocalyptic mod for Warband released back in 2015. It also happens to be a mod that people in the comments have recommended to me several times, so here we are at last to see just how well zombies and Warband merge together. Right off the bat, I love the vibe. Very Last of Us-ish. The game has you start as a survivor on the open road, which is where we meet our first zombie. They're kinda scary in a limited capacity sort of way. But following a brief encounter with some other survivor, we finally take a look at a map which, wow. This is based off Calradia, but everything changed. We got highways, skyscrapers, shipwrecks. It's pretty interesting. So the Reckoning takes a very different approach from your typical Warband mod. While you can still create your own Warband and do lots of things, a big emphasis of the game is scavenging. As said in the description on ModDB, there are no longer villages, only points of interest. These range from abandoned settlements to isolated areas and shipwrecks. In these areas, you fight off zombies and find supplies. The supplies can then be traded in towns for food, gear, and weapons. Speaking of weapons, this is obviously a gun mod and works about as well as you'd expect, which is to say, it's alright. The big difference I've noticed though is that unlike basically any mod, where ammo is something that replenishes after every fight, bullets in the Reckoning are permanent consumption. If you fire your bullets, they're gone, and you need to buy new ones. That's not to say zombies need bullets to be killed. In fact, zombies are probably the lamest part of this mod. While animations, textures, and sounds are pretty good, it's still zombies. There's generally not many of them, and they only attack when you get really close, which makes it easy to pick them apart. What is definitely more scary though is humans. They do have guns, and they're pretty dangerous, ranging from maniacs to cannibals to Nazis. Yeah, Nazis, because of course. However, as also stated by the ModDB page, battles are very different. Maps are selected from certain presets instead of being generated randomly, and NPCs will actively seek cover. Which, honestly, that's awesome and really well done. The mod also boasts vehicles, where limitations become a bit more obvious, and even on dead elephants, though my experience was limited. And of course, lots of impressive scenery. Shanty towns, hanged corpses, some of them serving as garrison apparently, and overall just post-apocalyptic vibe everywhere. And the mod legit has some pretty immersive moments, like this area near a cruiser, with the sunset and the music. It truly made for an immersive experience. However, while the mod is pretty bold, there's not much else to it. The scavenging gets repetitive, it's also difficult to tell which fief is an actual castle or town, and which one is a point of interest. And once you get past the zombies, there's just not much else to it. However, that's not the end for the Reckoning. While the mod hasn't been updated since 2015, another modder took it upon himself to make a new version called The Reckoning, the Third Stage, which is set 15 years after the Reckoning. On the surface, we have the same vibe, though the music is way more hardcore, with heavy metal and stuff. And generally, the map saw a lot of improvements. There's even more factions, as well as tons of Walking Dead Easter eggs, like many characters from the show appearing as companions, and even the town of Woodbury as a faction ruled by none other than the Governor. But of course, as hinted on ModDB, the main addition of this game is all the new weapons and vehicles. This mod isn't messing around. First, I started by getting a Harley. While it doesn't make any sound, riding around the battlefield while swinging an axe is pretty fun. The chopper though, well, it's bold, but yeah. What really appealed to me though was the addition of tanks. I haven't really seen tanks much in Warband, so I was curious. And the mod makes it real easy. You just need 5,000 dinars, you go to any town and you have the option to recruit. That's it. And whoa, it's actually pretty realistic. Damn, those are nasty hits. Yeah, okay, not so realistic after all. But that's just one tank though. Huh. I mean, honestly, it really improved a lot on top of the original Reckoning. I even went as far as assaulting a fortress, but that's not really balanced to say the least. And that leaves us with the Reckoning, the New Beginning, which is set 100 years after the original. The modder for this one though chose to start from scratch to add his own features, so a lot of the messy feel from the two previous mods are largely gone. The world map is much prettier in fact, and brought back native fief names, though now they are large urban centers. And I mean large. Look at this scenery. However, literally the first thing to happen when I get on the map is get attacked by a swarm of zombies, and damn, they are not the same. These ones can run, they're mutants, and they hit hard. This happened a couple of times. There are massive swarms everywhere. I found a zombie lair and thought to myself, hey, I'm alone, I'm level 1, proportionally there won't be many zombies. I can do this. Well, hot damn, I can't even kill this top half of a corpse. Jesus, they're tough. Eventually I chose to cheat, get myself some troops and better gear, and things got a little better. But damn, these swarms are still dangerous as hell. That's also where I noticed some giant mutants, and they don't mess around either. Some of them have miniguns though, damn! I managed to grab one of them and holy sh**. If only they didn't fire so fast, that'd be awesome! You might think I'm just going through this mod too fast, but you're almost experiencing in real time right now. It's just that insane. In fact, a lot of people complain about it. Zombies are too powerful, too numerous, things are too expensive, and guns are virtually non-existent from stores. Only way I could progress is by cheating, and even then, it gets ridiculous. But in conclusion, these are the zombie mods for Warband. The Reckoning was very creative, and I praise it for trying to take Warband in a very different direction. It even had the Resident Evil camera angle, which really changes the whole vibe of the game. Unfortunately, it wasn't completed because as soon as you aim your gun, it takes you to regular camera, but that would have been very memorable. Overall, it's a testament to how far mods can go. However, you're better off playing the third stage, as it adds a lot more things and fixes plenty of the bugs from the previous mod. The New Beginning though, that's a thing of its own. Clearly not completed, but also not meant to be taken as seriously. Cheat your way to a higher level, and you can have some fun waging war on zombies and mutants. Either way, that's about it for today. So thank you all for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I got the link to all the mods in the description. Thanks again for watching, and have a good one. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm back with yet another Warband mod for you to try out, and it's called 457 AD, Last Years of the Western Empire. As always, if you enjoy the content, feel free to support the channel with a like and subscribe, and if you have other mods for me to try out, let me know in the comments. Now let's do this. 457 AD is a historical mod centering around Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. In 457 AD, the Roman Empire is on the verge of collapse. From this decaying empire, many factions have risen to challenge it. 457 AD is actually built on top of two massive mods, Britannwalda and Out Caesar Out Nihil, which I'm totally mispronouncing, so I will simply refer to it as ACAN from now on. If you've seen my videos on those, you know I love them. If you haven't, well, to sum it up, Britannwalda is one of the oldest yet most influential mods of Mount & Blade Warband. Set in the UK during the Dark Ages, the mod has a reputation for being very hard, but also very innovative. ACAN, on the other hand, essentially took Britannwalda, set it during the peak of the Roman Empire, and brought micro-kingdom management to the absolute extreme. So to put 457 AD in context, if you have Britannwalda on one side, bringing tons of new features to Warband, and ACAN on the other, taking those new features much further, 457 AD is somewhere in the middle, both historically and in terms of scope. As far as ambitious mod goes, 457 AD is right up there with the best of them. You have a huge map covering all historical factions of the time, and it's all reinforced with beautiful scenery and tons of historically accurate weapons and armors. As the player, you get the choice to start as either a solo adventurer, which is the usual, or a lord or a king. Starting as an adventurer, you will quickly notice the mod's difficulty. NPCs fight much harder, some of them are also very fast. Because of that, you will quickly want to get a warband. And that's where recruiting gets interesting. Unlike most mods, 457 AD allows you to recruit troops from castles and towns once you get sufficient renown. But in towns and castles, you typically have a fairly large pool of recruits, often over 20. And you can actually choose the troop type as you hire them. So if you're short on cash, you could, say, hire 20 recruits. But if you have enough money to hire elite troops, you could hire 20 veteran spearmen instead. This feature is so simple, yet so efficient that I'm baffled no other mod has introduced this before. The large pool of recruits saves on a ton of grind from going village to village, and the option to recruit at higher tiers can save you the trouble of risking your weaker troops in battle for the XP. In terms of battles, given the time period, tactics are focused primarily on skirmishing and fighting on foot. As such, cavalry is very expensive, and javelin throwers are more common than archers. A lot of the battle tactics, such as the use of ranks, can be traced back to Britannwalda, but I feel 457 AD does it better. For instance, javelins are just much more prevalent, and throwing them against rows of enemies is just so brutal, but also satisfying as hell. Come on, come on. Oh shit, no, come on. Oh shit. In terms of the map itself, like I said, there are many factions, so you could spend a lot of time fighting for a kingdom over a small portion of the map before moving on somewhere else. But the mod also offers many unique quests, which can be found talking to people in taverns, or discovering secret locations while traveling. These range from finding items, to killing a few targets, to joining factions for war. Not to spoil it, but there is a quest called the Battle of Finnsburg, which is very ambitious, and the Viking Conquest vibe is real with this one. Some quests also have you interacting with smaller, isolated factions. These are spread out throughout the map, and you have the option of trading with them or attacking the settlements to seize control and turn them into tributaries. So while you can't use them to start a faction, once you've taken them, they give you a significant passive income as well as recruits for your warband. Between the variety of quests and the high demand for mercenaries across the entire map, 457 AD ensures that you will never be bored. Starting a King sandbox actually feels a lot like starting a Total War campaign, as your character and faction options are limited to which historical ruler you want to be. And the initial difficulty will be based on the historical setting as well, so I chose the Roman Emperor and immediately found myself at war with many of my neighbors. And with so few lords to help out over so much land area, losing castles and getting your villages raided is inevitable, as was the collapse of the Western Empire. In terms of kingdom management, it's about everything I would hope for. We got the diplomacy submod, but also some layers from ACAN, such as when building town projects. However, 457 AD took the micromanagement down quite a lot, and I welcome that. The intense management of ACAN is really not for everybody, and that makes 457 AD much more accessible. My only issues right now with the mod are the sieges and small party size. Sieges currently are pretty much like native, except garrisons are fairly larger, so sieges are often just a long grind on a single choke point. And starting as a ruler, the party size is about 300, which isn't nearly high enough. Given the logistical difficulty of starting a military campaign with so few lords, you need to be able to field a large warband by yourself. ACAN let us start with a party size of 800, and that's so much better. As it stands, having a party of 300 only lets you respond to attacks within your own homeland. Depending on the faction you choose, going on the offensive is almost impossible. In conclusion, 457 AD is actually a pretty solid mod that covers a historical period that I feel doesn't get enough coverage today. It feels like culturally we always jump from the might of the Roman Empire straight to the Middle Ages, but a campaign map during one of the most chaotic times in Europe history makes for a really cool mod. It's also noteworthy to point out the sheer dedication to historical accuracy. It would be easy for modders to grab items made from other mods, like Roman and medieval armors, to use in their own mods, but by covering such a specific time period like no one else did, the modders went to great length to recreate the armors and weapons from the time period. The research is often shared on my Discord server, and it's seriously impressive. This is why I also say that unlike many other mods I've reviewed so far, I was in direct contact with one of the modders throughout making this video, and was able to share my thoughts and get some answers on the future of the mod, which only makes it all the more promising. For instance, I was informed that the Brittenwalda siege mechanic would most likely get introduced in the next update, and they're also working on making the small locations possible starting point for a character faction. These two things alone would already improve significantly an already solid mod, so I'm looking forward to what the 450 AD modders do next. Speaking of which, since they've created so many new assets to make this mod, they've also decided to port the mod to the remaster of Rome Total War. That's right, the modding team is also currently working on their own mod for a Total War game, also called 457 AD, where many of the same items created for Warband are now worn by Total War units. The mod isn't out yet, but not gonna lie, it's pretty awesome that they're doing that. But anyway, if you enjoy historical mods, ambitious mods, mods with unique quests, and are curious about this time period that doesn't get enough credit, then 457 AD is absolutely for you. Thanks for watching, everyone. It's been a while since I've done a Warband mod video, so hopefully I haven't lost my touch. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'm still looking for mods to try out, so feel free to drop your recommendations down below. Thanks again, and have a good one. Hello everyone, I'm Duke, and welcome back for yet another Warband mods video. I love Warband, and it's undeniable that the modding community has done some fantastic work with it, but today I felt like doing something different. Instead of looking for the most ambitious, immersive mods out there, why not try some of the weirdest? Mods, after all, don't all seek to achieve the same things, and sometimes the difference between a good mod and a bad mod is just the amount of time and effort that's put into it. Other mods are also meant to be experimental in nature, to see just how far you can push the boundaries of the game. And so today, we're trying some of these mods, and I can tell you already, these mods are by far the weirdest, dumbest, wackiest mods I've ever played on Warband. And purely by coincidence, all 5 mods I'm about to play were all made by the same modder. This modder goes by the name of Kill You Ready, and I gotta say, this person has a lot of talent, but also a lot of free time and imagination, and probably don't belong in this dimension. It's gonna be a wild one, so if you enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe as usual. Now let's go. Starting off, CSGO but Warband. Yeah, how'd you like to play CSGO but in Warband? That's what this mod is. Okay, new game. Oh, boom, just straight into it. Jesus Christ. Hardly any character creation, and forget about a world map or warbands for that matter, it's just a big free-for-all. You're stuck in first person, and much like CSGO, you got a whole bunch of weapons. The hand animations are actually surprisingly good, but what you see here is all you get. Soon as you run out of ammo, you move on to the knife until you either die or get bored, which for me took about 5 minutes. We have tons of grenades, but they don't really work well, and guns don't even reload. And you can have as many new games as you want, but it's always the same setting. It would be nice to have different battle maps, but choosing a custom battle option just caused the mod to crash. But hey, it's an interesting experiment. Only overshadowed by the fact that A, CSGO the game already exists, and B, it's free. As in free to play. So why would you ever port CSGO to Warband, and who would bother with it? Up next, Warcraft 3 but Warband. Yeah, the title is a theme, so get used to it. But jokes aside, with ambitious mods out there like Warsword Conquest that already brings Warhammer to life, doing the same thing with Warcraft would be very interesting. But I also assume it would take a lot of work, and I would not expect a single modder to make it happen. And so, even though the mod literally just got an update, like just as I was writing the script, the mod is a massive contrast between the great work that went into it and just how incomplete it feels. Starting the mod, you're immediately given a warband of 1,000 orcs. There's no direction, and you're just on the map. Which is nothing like Azeroth, by the way. It's just a completely flat, green surface, with 4 factions representing the 4 main factions of Warcraft 3. There is some scenery, which is nice, but the inventory makes no sense. What are these items? And why can't I see my appearance? Apparently, this is what I look like from the party window. But in battle, I'm actually an Orc Blade Master. And to be fair, the scenery and characters look pretty decent. If it wasn't for that huge HUD, nearly taking half of the whole screen. I get they were trying to recreate the HUD from Warcraft 3, but damn! Also, see the map in the corner? It's the exact same no matter where you are in the game, and your character is represented by that nerd's face. What is this? Also, the background music isn't mine, by the way, this is the soundtrack from the mod. This really sets the Warcraft atmosphere, doesn't it? In terms of combat, there's not much to say. The potential is definitely there. Catapults are deployed and appear functional, but I can't even inflict damage on them. Gotta love though that the fighting animation, when visible, is the exact same as the original game, at least for the player. You can also use spells such as invisibility, which I tried while in the castle, and it seems to work. But both times I tried it in battle, it caused the mod to crash. I actually think a Warcraft total conversion would be pretty awesome, but this modder may not have the resources or proper sense of priorities to get it done. It's still a good effort though. But if you thought those visuals caused you a headache, wait till you see this next mod, KOF but Warband. KOF is an acronym for King of Fighters, which is a series of fighting games, but the whole point of this mod is to implement the 2D characters of KOF into Warband, and as you can see, this is weird. So not only is the first-person camera completely scrapped, but because your character is always technically sideways, you can only ever hit enemies if they are to your side. This is actually pretty funny. The music certainly helps. And it might just be that I don't know the game or the reference, but who even is this guy? He's not a badass, he's just really lame looking, at least compared to what I'm actually supposed to look like. Other NPCs are fully 3D, except for their faces. Yeah. But then there's other random 2D characters, including animals. I guess the goal was to make every character 2D, but I'm assuming the modder just never got that far. Next up, Air Combat, but Warband, which is actually a very vague way of saying that it's a Dragon Ball Z mod. Now there's something you would never expect. The very idea of porting Goku to Warband is just ridiculous. But here we are. And honestly, it's pretty impressive. Is this even Warband? The HUD is completely changed, Goku looks pretty good, and the controls? It's actually very confusing. Thankfully there's a guide on ModDB, though I wish it was structured a little better. Essentially Goku can either fly or fight on the ground, you can choose between different power attacks, which drain your energy so you have to refill frequently. Even so, the mod is very different from your usual Warband mechanics, so it's gonna take some time to learn. Not for me though, because I'm way too much of a noob. Nevertheless, it's a pretty wacky mod by Warband standards. And finally, this one was actually a blast. Violence basketball, but Warband. This one is unironically fun, at least for a good 30 minutes. Essentially, every single battle in Warband is replaced with either a match of soccer or basketball. And much like with Goku, the mod doesn't mess around. Soon as you click on a group on the world map, be it Bandit, Lord, or Caravan, you go straight into the game. And the games are stupidly awesome. Essentially, it's regular sports, you know, get the ball into the goal, but also you have weapons, so you can fight off the other players that just keep respawning. Both parties also get troops in the seats above that are shooting down below, so try playing soccer while everyone is swinging swords around and people in the balconies are shooting at you. And goalkeepers aren't messing around. Soon as you shoot the ball, they just jump and spin like it's Shaolin soccer. In basketball, it's pretty much the same, except you can dunk too apparently, not that I ever managed to pull it off. But even shooting the ball up into the air, there's a legit risk it'll get stuck in limbo, at which point the game resets it in glorious fashion. Just what the hell was that? Currently, those are the only two sports I could play on the world map. Doesn't seem to matter where you go, it'll be either one of those. But entering the camp menu, you can also play tennis. Though currently, it's almost impossible to hit the ball back before it hits the ground. And you can also play pool, where essentially you just push the balls into the corners and the team that gets the most wins. This would actually be a pretty cool battle map in Mean Greens. And if that wasn't enough, while I'm currently fighting off World War II themed soldiers, the factions in this mod are ridiculous, ranging from Transformers to Naruto characters. Jesus Christ. And then add the music on top of that, and my goodness, this mod is the funniest I've ever played. In conclusion, these mods are not the best, but they do leave an impression, and I hope they give you a chuckle. But all jokes aside, one redeeming quality found in all of these mods is that Calradia wastes no time at all in showcasing his features. So for instance, if you want to play Goku, like it's right there, all on the table. But basically, all other mods had me start with maxed out stats, already a huge warband, and a lot of money to pay all of your soldiers. Essentially, all the mods are telling you like, you ain't got no time to go through the usual grind of warband, trying to level up, building up your army, and getting money. It's like, here's all of that. Enjoy the mod. Honestly, a lot of modders could learn a thing or two from that. I mean, why would you hide all of your best features behind hours upon hours of grind when you could just, you know, give it to people? That said, it's the end of this video. So thanks again for watching, and have a good one. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. About a year ago, I made my first Warband mods video. At the time, the mods I showed were just my personal favorites from back when I played the game casually over a decade ago. But since then, you guys have been suggesting more mods. And more mods. And when I tried to make a final video on the best Warband mods, you still gave me more. So I tried to make the most epic ranking ever, and still, you give me more. The Warband mods just never seem to stop. And I've been keeping a spreadsheet of all the mods, and look at this, we still have a whole bunch. Normally, I'd probably name this video my favorite mods from Warband Part 5, but screw it. This is just more mods you guys keep recommending to me. It's been a damn long journey so far, so here's an attempt at reviewing all the mods that never made it in my previous videos into a single video. Before we do start, I should clarify something. While all of these mods are pretty solid, when you've played as many mods as I have, some become very redundant, and this will show. So here's how I ranked the mods. The first 4 I consider redundant. Number 8 to 4 are pretty solid mods for people who like those types of mods specifically. And the last 3 are my top 3, the mods I really enjoyed and definitely recommend. As always, I put timestamps, so feel free to skip ahead. Starting with something very simple, A New Dawn. A New Dawn is a mod that takes place in Calradia, but adds a lot of new items, lots of new troops, and a bunch of sub-mods such as Diplomacy. If this sounds familiar, it's because there's already a whole bunch of other mods like that, such as Banner Page, Native New Design, Florists, and Diplomacy for Leddom. The idea of improving native Warband is a good idea, but why do so many people gotta do the same thing? These mods are so similar from one another, at this point they just blend together for me. So when it comes to New Dawn, does it at least bring something unique? Well, I did notice a few interesting things about this particular mod. Turns out there's a chance of winning random, high-quality loot during battles. For example, I literally got a high-end helmet after my very first fight. So that's cool, I guess, random surprises like that. But the most pleasant change, seriously, is just how devastating cavalry charges have been made. A lot of enemies, you don't even have to hit them with your sword, you can simply run them down with an average horse, which is pretty awesome. In fact, why aren't there more mods like this? Even mods like Suvarnabhumi only allows for this to happen with war elephants. But in real life, horses would definitely knock the wind out of people, so that should definitely be more recurrent. So take notes, modders, A New Dawn got this part right, and it is awesome. But besides that, like I said, there's not much to it. It's another native revamped mod. It does the trick, but I really have my fill of Calradia, I'm not gonna lie. But speaking of having my fill with Calradia, here's Calradia Borderlands. I can't stay on this one for too long either, to be honest. Imagine Calradia, but much bigger. That's Calradia Borderlands. This map is ridiculously huge, and also brings many more factors and cultures. Notably, there's some samurai factions, and the scenery is borrowed directly from Gekokujo. But again, this mod is basically like, hey, if you didn't think Calradia could be any more grindy, here's twice the size. Have fun. In all seriousness, there's definitely a lot of work that went into it, but I'm too worn out to fully appreciate it. That said, there's few extra features. Mainly this mod has a lot of bandits, even very large groups, which is fun and challenging. However, these large groups don't offer any rewards to my knowledge, which is disappointing. There is also a feature for the Dark Knight invasion, a huge army that invades Calradia, which I've seen in other mods. And while it is impressive, it's no Zen invasion from Paris now. And again, that's pretty much it. It might be a good mod for you if you don't like to go too far away from native, but me, I gotta get out of here. Next up, Sands of Faith, another Crusade mod. There must be dozens of them. But first off, this is the first one I see with an animated menu. How did no one else do that? But anyway, it's a Crusade mod with everything you would expect from it. Battles are immersive, so is the music, so is the scenery, the armors are gorgeous, it's got it all. However, this mod also lets you start as an historical ruler. I was leaning towards Saladin, but I always play the Muslims. Time to go Crusader with the Leper King. And they really did the mask pretty good. Also props for the extra layer of dust from the horses in battle. Nice touch. But overall, there's just not much else that sets this mod apart from In the Name of Jerusalem or Crusades and Jihads. It's a Crusade mod, another Crusade mod. Well done, but much like improved native mods, picking Sands of Faith over any other will depend on the slightest change you prefer the most. And oh my god, we're back in Calradia already. This is... I don't even know how to say that. Iskl mod? Whatever. This mod puts a stronger emphasis on kingdom management. Namely, if you start as a ruler, you get to create your own troop trees from scratch. And I gotta say, it's both intuitive and fun to do. I must have spent at least half an hour exploring the options. Each troop tier is given a budget and skill points to focus on whatever build you want, and it's up to you to make the most out of them. The mod even lets you choose the gender of your troops, which is awesome, until you realize women voices in Warband are very limited. That said, like any good mod that lets you start as a ruler should do, the mod instantly gives you a party size of over 600. Now that's what I'm talking about. The factions in this mod have also been split into several smaller ones, so going to war is somewhat easier because it's on a smaller scale. Couple of glitches though, the option to declare war does not appear in the diplomacy options, so the only way to attack a kingdom is to attack a lord without warning, which I'm not fond of. Also, all of the men have squished faces. All of them. It's distracting to say the least. But this is all far from being what all the mod can do. According to ModDB, you can marry rulers, there's tons of unique quests, rebellions, the ability to kill lords, and plenty of other features. which I can't cover now because we gotta move on. However, of all native revamped mods out there, this one is actually kinda refreshing. But standing at number 8, let's go into historical mods with Renaissance. This mod was made by Zed Paolo, the same modder behind Sparta, for which I made a review a few months ago. And much like Sparta, the immersion here is real. Come to think of it, it's actually funny that so many mods have a Renaissance aesthetic, but this is the first mod I ever played that actually takes place solely in Italy. This mod also gives you the choice to start as a historical ruler, so of course I went with Cesare Borgia, because it's the only name I remember from Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Overall, I don't really have anything bad to say about the mod. The armors are simply stunning, the music is captivating, and the fights are just brutal. Only issue, it's a little buggy. I had a crash during a siege. But I could probably have made a dedicated video for this mod as there's a lot to it. But anyway, if you're looking for the definitive Italian Renaissance mod, this should be an instant favorite for you. However, here's a different time period that captivates me just a tiny more. At number 7, this is 1429, the 100 Years' War. This mod takes us to the late medieval period in France, as the French struggled to kick the English out of the country for good, and that's about all there is to it. Like any good total conversion out there, we got new armors, scenery, music and sound effects. It's also got the fighting animation I like. The mod also boasts many unique quests, one including Joan of Arc. Problem is, I can't even complete it. The first quest is giving some food, including ham, to a group of rebels. But I spent a whole hour going into villages, markets and taverns looking for the damn ham, and I could not find it, so I can't progress. But still, the mod is pretty intense and is gorgeous. Anyone fascinated with the 100 Years' War will have a blast. I should also point out that this mod was made in French, and it is refreshing to see a mod in French. But don't worry, as there's also an English version. And oh my god, back to Calradia. Though this time it's more positive. This one is called Calradia, I think that's how you say it? This mod was made by the same person behind the Evlat mod. I suggest you watch my video on it for more context. Calradia takes place in Calradia, but with a central quest. Essentially, the Calradia is the Emperor of Calradia. The Emperor is whoever wears the crown, which has 7 gemstones. So in this mod, the goal is to find all gemstones to make yourself the Calradia. But once you do crown yourself, all kingdoms will declare war on you, while you will get the support of villages for plenty of recruits. So that's actually a very interesting concept. And if you've played Evlat, this very much feels like a prequel. Once again, companions are essential for completing new quests. In fact, the inn from which you start in Evlat can be restored in Calradia. But overall, this mod is pretty solid, if not a bit grindy. To get the gems, you must first beat 4 groups of each bandit type. Each yield a map to a bandit army, which yields a gem. So it takes many fights, and the bandit armies are ridiculously huge. That said, story-based mods are definitely refreshing, and I consider this one a new personal favorite for its originality. So far, we've mostly had historical mods or native revamped. Time for some fantasy with Legacy of the Dragon. This mod has a high fantasy setting with the elements you would expect from it, different species, such as elves, orcs, and the undead, and magic, like spellcasting or summoning troops. But the mod lets you pick a race, then you set off. I went with an elf with the idea of exploring magic, and the mechanics are pretty similar to Fantasy Calradia. All over the world, there are key places where you can buy different types of magic from smaller factions, such as necromancers and wizards. From all of them, you can learn a bit about the lore, hire spellcasters, and buy gear. Once you have a spellbook, you can access your spells in the camp menu, and some of them are pretty cool. For example, you can summon the dead. They have a bit of upgrade potential, but the main caveat is that they can't get wounded, they can only die. Though what's really cool about them is that you can basically summon them indefinitely for free. The spell costs health, but you can just wait and heal, then do it again, essentially giving you an endless supply of soldiers for free. Other spells include summoning golems, which are pretty strong. So overall, this mod is pretty cool. My only criticism is that everything is expensive as hell. Not an issue if you cheat like me, but for anyone else, fully experiencing this mod will take some grind. Each spellcaster is like 1,000 dinars. Faction gear can go up to 20,000 dinars. And the funniest part is that there is a warlock hideout at the south of the map. After defeating a few demons, you can talk to a warlock and get really high-end gear from him. However, like I said, it's crazy expensive. And at the same time, some of those items need a lot of skill. This 100,000 dinar sword requires 30 strength to wield. What's the point of getting it? You can also buy a giant spider, which I've seen in other mods, but the riding skill needs to be 5, which takes some time to level up to. And other than the looks of it, it's nothing special. These items can be expensive, sure, but you should be able to use these items without the grind of leveling up, is all I'm saying. Also, dragons. As in the name of the mod, they do have dragons in this mod, but, well, at some point you reach the limitations of the game. They do make me want to run away though. They are intimidating, just not in a full dragon sort of way. Overall, if you enjoy high fantasy mods, this is pretty good, but I do recommend cheating to get to the good stuff right away. Back to historical mods, here's a surprisingly good one, the American Civil War Revived. Another solid mod on this list. This one takes you to the, well, American Civil War. You can choose between the Union or the Confederacy, with the goal being of destroying the other. Like previous mods, you can start as a ruler, or more specifically in this mod, as a general. So of course I chose Grant, and the outfit looks pretty good. And with a large starting party size, the game sets you off on a quest to take a Confederate fort. In terms of battle, this mod centers on the firing line, and does it really well. It's similar to Leg, except the AI in Civil War doesn't just charge like an idiot. The battles are actually very immersive, with artillery, and the new death screams really bring out the horrors of war. And the increased battle size also makes for amazing battles and sieges. As said on the ModDB page, however, this is a mod meant to be played as a commander. As a soldier, all it takes is one bullet. So your power as a soldier is pretty much meaningless. To win the battle, you need to line up your troops just right and pour fire into enemy ranks. Only issue I have is that while you can hire artillery, for some reason I can't buy any. I'm probably just missing something. The only other mod I had played in this time period was 1860s America, which put more emphasis on the adventurer part and less so on battles. But American Civil War blows it out of the water, to be honest. And it just got an update like 2 weeks ago, so make sure to try it out. At this point, we're getting into my top 3. So here we go. At number 3, Revenge of the Berserk. This mod is based on a manga called Berserk, about a mercenary called Guts, who wields a massive sword. I don't know the manga sadly, so this connection is lost on me, but essentially Revenge of the Berserk takes you to another low fantasy world, and puts you in the role of Guts. This is a story-driven mod, with an ever-updating quest telling you what to do next. And comparing the quest in the game to the manga summary on Wikipedia, this mod seems like a clear adaptation. So far into the mod, this is word for word the story. But okay, so this is a story-driven mod. What else? Well, the character of Guts is made fairly well, and as a berserker, you're given a massive sword. Your fighting skills are practically maxed out, and you can wreak havoc on enemy troops. Like seriously, there's a mission where you have to kill 100 troops by yourself, and it's brutal. In fact, the giant sword can swing at many enemies by charging, which means holding the sword for an extra second until you hear a sound effect. It's awesome, as each swing can take out like 3 enemies at a time. It kinda reminds me of Nightmare in Soul Calibur 3 actually. If only it was that epic. Well, maybe we're gonna have that in Bannerlord. But that's basically it. In terms of the world itself, it feels similar to Calradia. The kingdoms have changed, but there's few different units with different sizes, and overall it's pretty similar to Native. The main appeal is combat and the story, and I actually like that it always tells us what to do next and what to expect. Lots of story-based mods sometimes don't do anything and you're just wondering what to do next. Not with this one. All in all, Revenge of the Berserk is pretty good, especially if you love slashing enemies around. Number 2, Rising Sun. You cannot talk about Rising Sun without talking about the mod it's based on, Gekkokujo. Gekkokujo is one of my classics. If you love samurai and feudal Japan, Gekkokujo is the mod to play, and I've often ranked it high in my videos. So Rising Sun is based on Gekkokujo. You can pretty much find the same map, scenery, and items. The main difference is that Rising Sun is over 200 years later, during the fall of the samurai. The emphasis is much more placed on guns, although there's a clash of technologies, if you will. Guns will be devastating at range, but if a fully armored samurai makes it to your line, it gets messy quickly. But in a sense, I would say Rising Sun is like the Fall of the Samurai DLC to Shogun 2. If you love the samurai but also love the gunpowder era, this mod does a fantastic job of combining both worlds, and it nails the time period. It absolutely is a worthy companion to Gokujo, and you should definitely get it. And finally, the best mod I've discovered for this video took me to a galaxy far, far away. You guessed it, at number 1, Star Wars Conquest. This is by far the biggest surprise today. Originally, the mod was meant for the original Mount & Blade, but a few years ago it was added to Warband via the Steam Workshop. And I mean, you can only expect so much here, right? Star Wars and Warband? This would take too much work. But look at this! This has to be the most gorgeous world map I've ever seen, and it honestly works great! So in Star Wars Conquest, you get to choose one of 3 starting factions: the Empire, the Rebels, or the Hutt Cartel. I initially started as a Wookiee for the Cartel, but as with many fantasy mods, non-human species have very limited compatibility. So I started again with the Empire, but not before meeting Jabba the Hutt, and well, he looks creepy in that chair. But anyway, regardless of which faction you choose, you immediately get to become a lord of that faction by just speaking to the ruler. So I swore homage to Palpatine. And after that, it was a big free-for-all as I went from planet to planet to get recruits. But right off the bat, the scenery is drop-dead gorgeous. Whether you're on Endor, or Coruscant, or the Death Star, or Tatooine, it's everything you would expect. Items-wise, we of course get the classic armors found in Star Wars, but also a wide variety of lightsabers. The lightsabers are quick and absolutely deadly, with the sounds to boot, so it's all good and fun. There are force powers too, of course, though it's mainly throwable items, similar to magic spells in other mods. And while you can't block with a lightsaber, there is a shield in the form of a force shield, which works pretty well. But because of the clear addition of blasters, this is by and large a gun mod. Horses have been replaced with speed bikes, but they're largely inefficient, and most armor will only protect you from a laser shot or two. This means battle in Star Wars Conquest tend to switch from brutal close quarters or distant firing lines that last for a while. But between all of that and the music, Star Wars Conquest is everything I could ask for in a Warband mod. If you're looking for a serious mod with lots of options, in one of the most beloved universes, then Star Wars Conquest is definitely for you. Props to the modders for rising up to the challenge. And that's about it for today. Thanks for watching, everyone. This video was basically about reviewing all of the remaining mods I had yet to play in one single video, so I hope you enjoyed it. What's in the future? Well, I'm sure there will be more recommendations, but future mods would really have to stand out for me to consider reviewing them. And I've already tried ranking all the mods I've played before. If I did it again, I'd go from ranking 42 mods to 64. And sure, some of those new 24 mods have surprised me and would change the ranking, but screw that. Anyway, links to all mods can be found in the video description, so thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome back to my channel. On this channel I've covered the Mount & Blade games extensively, especially the mods, but until now there was one game in the franchise that I avoided, Mount & Blade with Fire and Sword. I never really knew what it was, I figured it was a paid Warband DLC and not much else. But when you look at the store page on Steam, it's not a DLC, it's being sold as its own game. So what is with Fire and Sword, and is it actually worth a try in 2023? Well, that's the question I aim to answer in this review, so if this helps you out, you can also help me out by subscribing to the channel. I'm still far from making this a full-time job, so every bit helps. Thank you, and let's do this. So right off the bat, the presentation is a bit misleading. With Fire and Sword presents itself as its own game, but it's not. What it is a standalone expansion. It's a DLC for Warband that does not require you to own Warband to run it. Because of this, With Fire and Sword very much feels like a total conversion mod in all but name, rather than a proper Mount & Blade sequel. That said, what's it about? With Fire and Sword takes its title and story from a novel of the same name, which depicts Poland's struggle to remain independent in the 1600s. So in Fire and Sword, the map centers around Eastern Europe, with Ukraine in the south, Russia in the east, Sweden in the north, and Poland at the center. The time period as well as the culture is reflected accordingly with new scenery and items. And that's about it broadly, but at 11 Canadian dollars at full price. What unique features, if any, does Fire and Sword bring to the table? Well, the big one is guns, muskets, pistols, and grenades. If you played any gun mod on Warband, you can basically give credit to Fire and Sword for actually introducing the mechanics and animations. And here, it works about as well as you'd expect. Guns are slow to reload and they're not fully accurate, but they are deadly. Along with guns came the firing line formation, which is as satisfying as it can get. Besides adding guns, battles are essentially the same, but sieges have seen some improvements. You now have several options for attacking. You can poison the water supply to thin out the garrison before your assault, but you can also choose between swarming the walls with ladders or creating a breach with explosives. Explosives make it easier to attack, but in my experience, explosives don't always work and you have to keep trying. You can also bribe the castle commander to open the gates for you, allowing the castle to be captured more easily. Overall, sieges are way more dangerous because of firearms, but they add a bit of variety that makes them slightly less tedious than Warband sieges. But one of the most noticeable gameplay changes I like the most is the addition of mercenary camps scattered across the map. In these camps, you can hire many mercenaries at a time for relatively cheap. And the mercenaries' culture is tied to the country it's settled in, so for example, going to a mercenary camp in Poland will give you Polish mercenaries. The only weird thing is that mercenaries only get very basic equipment that they retain even as they level up. This is actually part of a core feature which allows you to customize your troops. To do so, you can buy upgrades in the mercenary camp by choosing all the armor and weapons of each mercenary type. It's a bit confusing and definitely makes everything more expensive, but the cool thing about it is that mercenaries will always have that equipment, even the ones hired after making the changes, and they will have that gear whether they are rookies or elite. So in Fire and Sword, there's definitely more incentive to hire mercenaries rather than peasant recruits. The last big thing that Fire and Sword adds is a story campaign. The game offers 3 main quests based on which of the 3 main factions you choose to support: the Poles, the Russians, or the Cossacks. Regardless of which faction you choose, the main final reward involves becoming the ruler of that faction through a long series of quests. And that's about it. So is Fire and Sword worth it? Well, if you can't tell by the content in my voice, no it's not. Don't get me wrong, I acknowledge the contribution of Fire and Sword to the Mount & Blade franchise. If we go back to 2011, long before all the coolest mods from Warband even existed, with Fire and Sword definitely had an appeal. The problem is that most of that appeal is long gone. It may have sold itself as a standalone expansion, but it is so structurally similar to Warband that its biggest appeal, Firearms, was quickly ported back to Warband by the modders. And nowadays, if you want a solid gun mod on Warband, there are plenty of them, many of which I would consider better than with Fire and Sword. I can think of maybe 2 reasons for why you'd still want to buy Fire and Sword today. The first being the setting. If you like the time and place, or want to play as a winged hussar, then yeah, the mod will do that for you. Though I should warn you, playing with wings in your back can be very distractive. And if you want to lead like an epic hussar charge, you could, but in Fire with Sword, you can't simply get hussars like you would train Swadian recruits into Swadian knights. To get your own hussars, according to the game Wikia, you need to be a Polish lord, you need to own a town, you need to fully upgrade the town projects, and you need to hire all the garrison commanders. After all that, you need to wait for the winged hussars to spawn in your garrison every few days. It's a pain in the butt in my opinion, but it might be worth it for you. The other reason to play the game is to play the campaign itself. And it is pretty cool that they have 3 campaigns. That means they add a bit of replayability, you know, you choose one faction in one game and then try out with the other. But I'd argue there are many free mods with better stories. In fact, I made a video about it just recently. The camping options in Fire and Sword are interesting, but I would not say it's memorable. There's no huge twists, the companions aren't really involved, and there is even an active risk that the campaign breaks if certain things happen on the world map at the wrong time. Not to mention, there's no direct way of getting started with any of the main quests right away. Each quest requires that you have +10 relation with the main faction, but also you can't be aligned with them prior to starting. So good luck getting that +10 if you can't be a mercenary or a lord. Enjoy escorting caravans for a bit, I guess. If you're willing to pay to experience a story in Mount & Blade, I would suggest you get the Viking Conquest DLC instead. The story has more intrigue and drama to it, it involves the companions more, and the DLC is overall way better, adding more stuff. I guess one thing that could have made this game more appealing is the fact that having it as a standalone expansion allows it to be independently modded. That is, mods could be made exclusively for with Fire and Sword. Sounds great in theory, but if you go on ModDB, there's only a single page worth of mods, going down to 2013. Not saying some of these mods aren't interesting, but again, as soon as modders grabbed the gun mechanic, there was no reason to mod with Fire and Sword anymore. But anyway, to sum it up, with Fire and Sword would have probably been awesome in 2011, but much like the Winged Hussars themselves, it's pretty much become obsolete. But if you've already played it, I'm curious what you think, so feel free to tell me in the comments. For anyone else, thanks for watching. That's all there is for today. As I said earlier, I've been trying to make YouTube my full-time job for nearly 2 years now, and I'm still pretty far from achieving this. So you want to help, you can like, subscribe, comment, just share the videos around, everything helps. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. Now, I've done a lot of Warband mod videos, a lot, but so far, all of my attempts to clear the spreadsheet of all the Warband mods you've been recommending have failed. Mostly because every time I drop a new Warband mod video, you people just keep bringing up more mods for me to try. Every damn time! So, you wanted more Warband content? Here it is. Before we start though, a word from the sponsor of this video. This video is brought to you by me. That's right, I do a lot of Warband mod videos and a bunch of other things, so you know, if you like the content, you should subscribe. Anyway, here we go. Warband mods that you recommended, again. Starting very light at number 15 with the Eagle and the Radiant Cross. This mod takes us to the original map for Calradia from the first Mount and Blade game, but in the late medieval to Renaissance period. Based on the time period, it's got about everything you would expect, from the armors to the weapons, so you can enjoy the firing line or do some pike and shot, whatever you like. However, given that it's number 15, I don't have much else to say about this mod. What this mod is basically is native Warband, but with more recent weapons and a few sub-mods like Diplomacy. But personally, I'm also having a bug where towns don't spawn at all, but that could just be me, or the game version, or anything else really. I actually wanted to try a siege to see what happens, and well, it went about as absurdly as you can expect. To be fair, I wish mods had a feature to make this possible, if only to make battles and sieges less grindy when we're not in the mood. So yeah, I'm sure it was a pretty cool mod when it was released, but now it's just incomplete. If you want a better version of this, I'd recommend either Calradia 1417 or Nova Aedas. Next up, at number 14, this is Independence of Chile. This mod takes us to South America in the 1800s. As the title suggests, it mostly revolves around the Chilean War of Independence, which, I'll admit, I don't know much about, so it's not an historical event that I'm particularly invested in. Being the 1800s, the mod revolves mostly around the musket and the firing line, and overall, did a pretty good job. But other than that, once again, there's really not that much to say. Like other gun mods, it suffers from the same limitations. Because muskets are deadly but inaccurate, battles can drag on for a while at range, and in sieges, they can be unbalanced. But overall, I'd say the mod achieved what it aimed to do with the setting, I just wish it did more. It's basically native with guns, set in South America. You'll definitely appreciate it if you're passionate about the history and culture, but otherwise, as far as gun mods go, it's not bad, but there's better options out there. Similarly at number 13, here's Winds of the War. This mod takes us to Europe in the late medieval and Renaissance period. Given that there aren't that many mods for this time period, let alone in the entirety of Europe, it's nice to get a mod like that. However, Wind of the War is far from finished. As you can see on the map, some settlements don't even have proper names yet, and most of the lords retain the native names, rather than historical ones. Although to be fair, King Harlos would definitely make a pretty good French king. The mod does cover items from the time period pretty well, so the Gothic armors and such are pretty awesome, and they surprisingly offer a lot of protection. So in the mod, I basically got myself a French army and I attacked the English. And I noticed the battle started to drag on for a long time, with people beating the crap out of each other but nobody actually dying. I mean, look at this. I had to shoot this enemy at point blank multiple times, and he still wouldn't go down. So perhaps the armors are a little too overpowered? Overall, Winds of the War looks pretty good, and it does bring a bunch of sub-mods like pre-battle planning, diplomacy, and freelancer. But it also made armors so overpowered that fighting anything less than bandits becomes a real slug. So it's not a bad mod per se, it just needs a lot of polishing. And considering only one version was released in 2012, I don't think we'll get more than that. As far as Renaissance mods go, it was a good effort, but there's just better options. This mod did take us to a niche, interesting historical setting. At number 12, this is Golden Earth. It's rare for mods to feature North America, but North America when the Vikings first landed? That's pretty cool. As you can see, Native American tribes make up most of the map, with the Vikings having a few settlements off the coast. So essentially you can pick any side to fight the others, making it one of the few, if not the only mod I know of, where you can actively play as Native Americans. Not that I did, I wanted to check out the Vikings first, then I just ended up sticking with them. That said, Viking settlements are so few, I quickly found myself hiring native warriors to make up the numbers, and they look pretty awesome. And after joining the Vikings as a mercenary, I got in several battles, including an epic siege defense against endless waves of the Warband. Overall, it's a pretty good mod for people interested in this time period, which doesn't really get enough attention, I think. However, while the map is huge, there isn't much to do. It still feels a lot like playing Native. Or playing Viking Conquest, I should say. They added some of the soundtrack, which is pretty neat. The mod is also fairly recent, with the last update just last year, so it's possible we'll see more features in the future. As it stands, it's not the best, but it's pretty straightforward, it works, and I love the setting. Moving on to number 11, we have 12th century. This mod is mostly set in Asia during the Middle Ages. Although the mod mainly centers around China, it also covers Mongolia to the north, India to the south, and stretches all the way to the Middle East and bits of Hungary. The mod basically covers the entire landmass that Genghis Khan conquered, and one of the key sounds of this mod is that you can basically create your own Mongolian horde, in theory. But let's take a step back. 12th century is the only mod primarily set in China that I've played besides 180 Heroes. So is it any good? Well, yeah, overall the scenery is much better. I haven't seen anything from the native map. The items are also pretty cool, but the mod itself isn't real balanced or polished. For instance, bandits. They're the primary source of leveling up and loot in the early game, but in this mod they are very sparse and are often such big groups that they don't even count as early game targets. Markets are also very limited, with many stores not selling boots or gloves, and shields are practically non-existent in the mod. As for getting Mongolian troops, you actually have to be a Mongolian lord to recruit them, otherwise you get a different, weaker troop type, which does feel limiting. So overall, this mod is visually immersive, but I'd say it suffers from a lack of priorities. A good example of that is the Middle East and Hungary portion. I get that they wanted to cover the entire landmass that was reached by the Mongols, but if you have a mod set in China, no one is gonna bother playing in the Middle East. There are so many mods focused on the Middle East and the Crusades, that I feel 12th century should not have bothered with that region at all, and should have instead focused on polishing Asia even more. That's not to say the mod is bad, it's just not as good as it could be. If you're into medieval China, this should hit the mark, otherwise, it's still a diamond in the rough. This next mod though, I really liked, if only it was more stable. At number 10, this is the New World 1521. Upon playing this mod, I wanted to recommend it so bad. New World 1521 takes us to South America, just as the Spanish are landing. Much like Golden Earth, the mod centers around the native population as it comes into contact with Europe. And I gotta say, the Mayans and Aztecs and all these other civilizations look gorgeous in the mod. The flamboyant armors and obsidian weapons simply look amazing. It really feels like on the level of something like Gekokujo. Along with the music, the scenery, and the battlefields, the immersion of the mod is truly unique. Unfortunately, the mod is highly unstable and prone to crashes. The modder is well aware of this, but whether he's still working on a second version, as said on the mod page, is anyone's guess. As it stands, I would love to have my own army of Jaguar warriors and just clash with some conquistadors, but the moment the battles gets too big, it's almost guaranteed to crash. Seriously, this mod has a lot of potential to be amazing. If only it was stable, I would have put it among the top mods in this video, purely based on immersion alone. But moving on, back to modern day this time, we have at number 9, Snow in the East. Snow in the East is a World War II mod centering around the Eastern Front between Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia. The mod offers you to start as a mercenary with a warband of your own for a few select factions, and I ended up going with Finland to kick some Soviet butts. In terms of historical gun mods, this is the most modern I've ever played. In terms of immersion, the mod is as solid as I'd hoped for it to be. We got new scenery, new items, new music, we have it all. However, the more modern the weaponry gets, the more obvious the limitations of the game become. It's very difficult for mods like these to be balanced. Since we're past muskets, guns are more accurate and much faster to reload, which leads battles to either end very quickly up close, or drag on for a bit at long range. It also makes sieges basically suicidal unless you have a lot of troops to send into the meat grinder. The main fix for this would be what the Reckoning mod did. This mod had modern firearms, but implemented a mechanic that made NPCs seek cover. Pretty ambitious, I should say, and it would have to be the next addition to Snow in the East to make it work better. But besides that, the mod feels fairly complete. You can join either superpowers, or join smaller factions like the Polish Resistance, and it's basically a well-done World War II mod all around. And if you're looking for some gun mod that isn't incomplete like Red Wars, or as hardcore as Between Empires, Snow in the East should be the perfect balance in between. And number 8, this is Medieval Conquest. Medieval Conquest is based on 1257 AD, arguably one of the most ambitious mods ever made for Warband. which takes place in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa in the Middle Ages. So right off the bat, Medieval Conquest is just as massive and should be an instant winner for anyone who loved 1257 AD. Not that Medieval Conquest is all that different, it mostly just adds more features on top of 1257 AD. One of the main differences centers around kingdom stability. You can choose to start the game as a monarch, but you're not the monarch, you're a usurper. And a big part of the mod in this context is to stay in control of your kingdom, at least according to the instructions at the beginning. This mod also takes a feature similar to one found in a New Dawn mod, that of smaller factions forming through rebellions and civil war, which does make the map potentially a lot more chaotic. It's also a lot more hardcore overall in terms of combat. I'd say more about it, but there's not that much more to say. If you loved 1257 AD, or overall love medieval Europe, and you want even more complexity, Medieval Conquest may just offer that extra layer you're looking for, but it's entirely subjective. If you want something a little more niche though, and a lot more hardcore, then number 7 is for you. This is Rust's 13th century Way of the Warrior. I have a bit more to say about this one. Unlike 1257 AD, this mod focuses entirely on Eastern Europe in 1237, just as the Mongolian horde is about to show up. Rust's 13th century immediately distinguished itself by being ridiculously difficult. So where to even begin? Starting out as an adventurer is basically impossible. For starters, good luck getting XP through fighting because looters give out 1 XP per kill, so leveling up through fighting would take forever. Want to get some decent loot? Well, in 13th century, looting requires extra time, during which you're completely exposed to attack from other groups. And imagine hitting enemies without them even flinching. The moment you encounter enemies with armor, landing a strike may not even stop them from landing their attacks, which makes fighting significantly harder. The mod also added the bleeding out feature, as seen in Brittenwalda, but it's way worse. A good hit could cause you to bleed out in mere seconds. Also, tournaments use the gear you have, meaning fighting lords under the game is virtually unwinnable. And recruiting from villages now require at least 5 relations with said village, so getting a warband up and running is also phenomenally difficult. So yeah, Rust 13th Century is probably one of the most hardcore, difficult mods I've ever played. There is a section that explains all in the game concepts, and it's definitely designed to be a punishing experience. Now, you can actually start as a vassal or king, which will give you good gear, money, and men from the start, so you can avoid the worst of it, but even then, it's bound to be just as brutal, only on a bigger scale when you go to war. Overall, the mod is actually pretty solid and immersive. If you don't mind the difficulty or actually enjoy it, then Rust 13th Century is definitely a good mod for this place and time. Another mod that represents its time period well stands at number 6 and is called Rome at War. At this point, I've played many Roman mods, and they do have a tendency to all look similar after a while because they're all about the Roman Empire. However, this mod was a pleasant surprise and does distinguish itself in a few areas. For starters, it's the only mod I've played in which Rome isn't at the peak of its power, but in its beginning. As such, the mod centers only around Italy and Greece, but there's still plenty of factions to go to war with, and the iconic legionaries just aren't a thing yet historically, so the Roman army is a bit more primitive. That said, the scenery, the items, and music all check the marks. Formation mechanics are present, and valleys of javelins are as satisfying as they get. What I did like the most though about this mod is that it not only lets you start at different stages like Lord or King, but it gives even more options. So you want to be a Lord? You can, but you can also choose your starting renown and also your starting wealth, which really makes it easy to just jump into the game and go straight to war. Overall, Rome at War is just one of many Roman mods, and although it's not technically complete, it still feels surprisingly solid. If you wanted to conquer the entire Italian peninsula, or unite all of the Greek city-states, this mod will definitely do the trick. But here we go, we're getting in the top 5 now, so here's Deeds of Arms and Chivalry. This mod takes us to the 100 Years' War between France and England in the late medieval period. If this sounds familiar, it's because I also reviewed a mod called 1429 The 100 Years' Wars a few months ago, and on the surface, these two mods are almost identical. They are both set in France at the same time, so the map, the scenery, and items are all pretty similar as well. 1429 has been taken down by its author though, so Deeds of Arms and Chivalry is more accessible, and which mod you prefer can depend on the slightest thing. When I played Deeds of Arms and Chivalry, I did notice a couple of things I really liked. Besides being equally immersive, it's also much more hardcore. The mod brings back the battle formations from Brittenwalda, as well as the sheer brutality of the combat. Battles in this mod are just deadly, it's ridiculous. They also amped up the range of archers and crossbowmen. They'll fire at each other with surprisingly good accuracy from across the map. And it does make sense when you think of the famous English longbows. But as with other mods, I also like that this mod allows you to start as a historical ruler of any faction, so for anyone less interested in the leveling up and warband building aspect of the game, and more interested in just fighting the 100 Years' War, this basically allows you to do just that right away. So overall, Deeds of Arms and Chivalry is a pretty solid mod. You can still play 1429 using my Google Drive link, but you can really pick either mod and still have a great time. At number 4, Honor and Glory. Honor and Glory is set in Eastern Europe in the late medieval period, and covers mostly Russia, Poland, Ukraine, and Sweden. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact same setting as the standalone expansion for Warband called With Fire and Sword, for which I already did a review. So in this mod, you've got the immersive scenery, items, and music, with most of the fighting centered around pikes and muskets. Pretty straightforward overall, but basically, if you don't want to spend money on With Fire and Sword, you can get a pretty close experience with Honor and Glory. There are some main differences, including the lack of a story campaign in the mod, but alternatively, in Honor and Glory, you can start as a ruler of any given faction and just go to war, which I do love the option. Honor and Glory is pretty solid and makes for a great mod for anyone who is a fan of this place and time period. My only complaint comes with the battle themselves. The mod emphasized a lot on morale, and troops are very prone to rout if the battle doesn't go well. This isn't much of an issue on its own, except the firing line tends to rotate based on the nearest enemies, so routing enemies could literally cause your firing line to face the wrong way, which is frustrating. But besides that, great mod overall. And finally, in the top 3, it's time we get into some fantasy mods, starting with, at number 3, with Chronicles of Might and Magic. This mod is based on a fairly old series of video games called Heroes of Might and Magic, which I haven't played, so it's likely some of its charm is lost on me. Basically, this is another fairly ambitious fantasy mod that covers both spellcasting and a wide range of non-human species. The mod also had one of the best intros I've ever seen. Basically, as soon as you start the game, you're in a town, and it just gets destroyed as a demon portal opens and overwhelms the city. It was a pretty awesome way to start the game, but then you get through a portal, and after that, it's just regular sandbox, I guess. Unless there's a unique storyline somewhere. If there is, I found no indication of it. But anyway, from here, the mod is pretty straightforward. Magic is similar to other mods, with magic staffs to throwing magic balls at people. There's also the spellbook mechanic, as seen in Fantasy Calradia, although it's a bit awkward to use. Then there's the fantasy creatures, an absolute ton of them, from zombies to vampires, from fiends and ogres, to floating brains, whatever that is. Seriously, it blows my mind how much effort went into these units, and it just makes battles all the more epic. Then there's the dragons, which, not gonna lie, it's probably the most impressive attempt I've ever seen on Warband. This is basically what happens when you couldn't care less about the game's engine's limitations. Careful not to get a headache though. After that, the main gameplay addition I've noticed is the sheer amount of dungeons on the map, each garrisoned with lots of strong units. They are a one-time exploration, so once you clear a dungeon it just disappears, but many of them offer unique items, which is pretty cool, and they'll keep you busy for a while. Overall, the mod was pretty solid, immersive, and stable, but also simple. I couldn't see a lot of change to the core game, but still, if you enjoy fantasy mods, this one is definitely worth a shot. If you want to take it to a whole other level though, number 2 is a must try. This is Blood and Steel. Blood and Steel takes us to Calradia with 3 main changes. Firstly, there's a bunch of fantasy elements, from undead knights to golems to remnants, whatever those are. Basically, there's a bunch of non-human species. Secondly, the game centers around a class system which you establish when starting the game. I of course went with a revolutionary peasant, and basically what this did is make me an ally with every faction, but also had good relations with all the villages, allowing for easy recruiting. And finally, the game just upped the battle size to 11. Each leadership perk point increases party size limit by 50. Each bandit group ranges from 50 to 400. Caravans also have 600 units in them, as do lords. Proportionally, recruiting is also made very easy, as each group often offer anywhere from 50 to 100 units, each tavern often offering 3 different mercenary groups at once. All in all, this means Blood and Steel is ridiculously epic. I also love the new battlefields. They are so immersive. Add to that grenades and guns, and you get yourself some pretty sick battles. However, this is worth pointing out, the mod is virtually impossible without cheating. Units are both expensive to recruit and expensive to upgrade, but bandit groups themselves barely yield any money. Even some things are just rigged to bankrupt you, like food. In markets, food can cost up to 4 times as much as they do in native, but some of these foods have even less units in them. Basically, feeding your army is almost impossible, so to reach the epic level of battles quickly, cheating is necessary unless you grind for a very long time. But all in all, if you're looking for a mod to just have senseless, massive battles while easily recruiting endless amounts of cannon fodder, Blood and Steel is one hell of a mod. The main thing I did not have time to experience was something called the Doom, that keeps being warned about as happening on like day 45 or something. But I might just save that for a dedicated video, as this mod has lots of layers to uncover. And finally, this one was a pleasant surprise and my instant favorite from all 15 mods I tried for this video. This is Touhou Gensokyo Warfare. This one is based on the Touhou project, a long series of video games dating back to the late 90s. To be clear, until playing this mod, I knew nothing about Touhou. So while the main charm of this mod is lost on me, the fact it still ended up being my favorite should be a testament to the quality of the mod. I also didn't have much expectations. From the looks of it, I anticipated a buggy, incomplete, wacky mess. But damn, I was so wrong. So in this mod, we're in the world of Gensokyo, which has lots of fantasy elements with humans and non-humans alike. Everything has the style of an anime, and although it's a bit silly looking, it actually works very well. I also didn't encounter any bugs. The mod is actually really solid, from the beautiful scenery to the items being very immersive. I did cheat very quickly to see what the mod could offer, and it got overpowered very quickly. From a magic attack that worked like a sniper rifle, to throwing daggers, and a stupidly fast and deadly fan. And not gonna lie, the characters look pretty badass. But the mod also comes with a central story divided in many chapters, which, wow. This makes Touhou not only a very well made anime mod, but also a very developed story mod. Playing Touhou turned out to be a very pleasant surprise, and I wish I could say more about it, but making this video was quite tenuous as it was. That said, it is the mod I enjoyed playing the most, and I wouldn't shut down the possibility of making a dedicated video in the future. It's definitely a very solid mod overall, and more than capable of adapting the world it's depicting. And that's about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you found some good mods to try out. All of them are linked down below. Don't forget to subscribe on the way there though, especially since I have a big surprise coming up right before Christmas. So hopefully you'll subscribe, and I'll see you then. On a serious note though, take a look at this. Those are my 12 most viewed videos, and 10 of them cover Warband, and they range from well over 120,000 views to over 26,000. So even on the lower end of 20,000 people who watched my videos, it's still over 5 times as many subs as I have right now. And make no mistake, I'm trying to make a living here, so thanks for helping out. Also in the meantime, I created a separate channel, check it out, and join my Discord server. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hello everyone, I'm Duke, and welcome back to yet another Warband mod video. Today we're looking at Warzone-Acron, a god mod inspired by the Fallout universe. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but I did start making Fallout 4 mod videos on my channel, so a Warband mod based on Fallout, that's the perfect crossover. And not only that, but Warzone-Acron is probably the best gun mod I've played on Warband, and this will become clear soon enough. So Warzone-Acron is set in the world of, well, Acron, which is a post-apocalyptic setting inspired by Fallout. While the world itself is fictional, much like Calradia, it's actually pretty similar to the real world in that there is no non-human species or magic, none that I found anyway. The world is destroyed with ruins everywhere, and different factions have risen from the ashes and are basically fighting each other for survival. In terms of the setting, it's pretty well done. We have a whole bunch of new, beautiful scenery, the battle maps are new as well, and the post-apocalyptic vibe is real. In terms of Fallout, we have the same font and similar hub to New Vegas, and many items from the game can also be found in the mod, including the iconic NCR Ranger outfit, which I really love. One of the factions is also inspired by the Legion, though they look pretty different. In terms of gameplay, the mod focuses more on solo survival than long-term conquering. For example, we have a bunch of new skills, such as scavenging and crafting. The idea of scavenging is that the edges of the world map are deserted wasteland where you can go passively to look for loot. The higher your scavenging skills, the more likely you are to find good stuff. Crafting comes in the form of workshops and towns where you can upgrade your items using craft materials found in shops, which the mod page says isn't a finished feature yet, but there's potential for sure. You can also get a pickup truck in towns to travel on the world map faster, but it needs gas, otherwise you can't use it. There's also an extra level of management in terms of your party. You need both food and water, and you'll notice all parties camp out at night to rest. If you don't rest, morale goes down real fast. And if you run out of food and water, over time your character will actually die. That's according to the mod page, that is. I didn't bother trying it. So yeah, the game puts a lot more emphasis on bodily needs and scavenging than on becoming a lord and conquering. But that's not to say it can't be done. However, recruiting from villages doesn't appear to be accessible unless you own them yourself. So the main ways of recruiting are either mercenaries in towns or groups of refugees just roaming the wasteland. But alright, let's talk combat. The mod comes with all kinds of firearms, each with their own ammo types, so pistols, automatic weapons, and rifles, we got it all. But this is where Warzone surpasses all other gun mods in my opinion. You see, the problem in most mods is that guns depend on the same mechanic as shooting with a bow. You hold the attack button until you get a good aim, and then you release. This is not inherently bad if you have a mod with muskets, but any guns with more than one bullet capacity always required to get the aim down, which slowed down the fire rate. To fix it, Warzone allows you to get into firing position simply by holding the right click. In this position, you can just keep firing endlessly, and it's a lot faster and much more stable. But then the mod made a massive leap by adding iron sights. If after right clicking you hold shift, you'll get into zoomed mode. All weapons come with at least the iron sights, so it makes shooting insanely precise. Seriously, this is really good. When I first played the mod, I could not believe how smooth this was. Never has a Warband mod made gun mechanics this good. And it's not over, because the game does come with sniper rifles and scopes. And guess what? You can aim with the scope. It zooms through the map, and you can snipe enemies from afar. How awesome is that? I want you to really think of the potential this brings to Warband, because I've always been limited, but not anymore. This is awesome. And finally, on top of that, the mod borrowed some of the battle mechanics from the Reckoning. It was possible for NPCs to actively seek cover, and here, Warzone does it as well. However, Warzone has much bigger battle scenes and not as much areas of cover. So when starting a battle, your troops will find whatever cover they can find, but if you have a lot of troops, the bulk of them will stay in the back. What's cool though is that if your troops skirmishing at the front get killed, troops in the rear will gradually join the fight, as I noticed here by doing it to the enemy army. The AI in the mod isn't so bad. Usually if you fight defensively against the Lord, they will approach gradually. If you're attacking them, they will find cover, and it makes charging them very costly. What's even more awesome though is that if you're vastly outnumbered, as I was here, the Lord will just banzai charge, hoping to overwhelm you, and it does make for some pretty ridiculously epic battles. In terms of sieges, it's pretty similar to the Reckoning as well in that there aren't really any walls. However, my experience with sieges is that enemies have a few layers of defenses and you gotta make your way through. So it's still a serious meat grinder. However, with a full auto sniper rifle, you can really do some damage there. As a final Fallout reference, the game also comes with healing kits for battle, and when you use them, it's an actual stim pack with full animation. Nice. And broadly, that's pretty much it. Scavenging is the primary way to go in early game, and as you get a good warband going, the battles can get pretty interesting. There's a few more things to it, of course. It is possible to get a ballistic shield to go in melee, but I would not recommend it. I haven't seen many troops on horses, but it is possible to get a horse and shoot from horseback, which is pretty cool, but not very accurate. If you do get the minigun though, it's definitely worth it just for fun. Once you do create your own faction, there's not much to it. You have the diplomacy mod to hire extra staff, but that's about it. However, in terms of campaign, it's pretty interesting as I haven't seen the equivalent of castles anywhere on the map. So any towns the factions have, they're the only settlements that need to be captured for the surrounding villages. After capturing 2 towns from a faction, they already had only 1 town left. So in terms of conquering the world, Warzone is also one of the few mods that make it possible in just a few gaming sessions, rather than an endless grind. So there's that too. Overall, with the new gun mechanics alone, this mod instantly became a personal favorite. The ability to snipe or go on minigun rampages, as well as the mechanics used by the AI, it all works really well. The immersive Fallout vibe is just the cherry on top for me, and unlike the Reckoning, which centers around very limited zombies, Warzone is full-on survivors fighting against each other, and it just doesn't drag on as much as other gun mods. The only real issues I have with the mod is, number 1, the lack of a story campaign. It does start with an interesting mission, but it's also over pretty quickly. It doesn't need a story campaign, but if there were some unique missions to get invested into the world and the lore, that would be pretty neat. And number 2, the world is fairly huge but doesn't have much action in it. Bandit groups feel very sparse, which makes early games drag on for a bit. I wish there were more bigger groups around. Keep in mind though, the mod is barely a month old. That's right, it came out at the beginning of the year, proving once again that the Warband modding community is still coming strong. They released it with the goal of it already being nearly finished, and it shows. It's likely they'll release another patch to fix a few bugs eventually, but other than that, Warzone-Acron is right there, and it's fully playable. And that's pretty much it for today. Again, thank you so much for using the loot link below to get the mod. You'll be supporting my channel that way, and I know it might be annoying, but it really helps me out. If you have other mods to recommend, as always, let me know in the comments, but do check the rest of my content, as it's likely the mod you have in mind is one I already covered in the past. And if you're going to be binging my content, well, you might as well subscribe too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. So this is going to be my shortest Warband mod review for sure, but I haven't done one in a while, mostly because I feel I've covered all there is to cover. That being said, I'm always on the lookout for new mods to bring something new to the table, and well, here we are. Yeah, this is real. Now, if you're not a Breaking Bad fan, it's never too late to become one. It's a great show, there's a great spin-off. So in this Breaking Bad mod, we basically have native Calradia. Starting a new game, we get the same starting options, and in the game, virtually everything is the same. The main difference is the addition of a new location in the Kingdom of Swadia called the Secret Lab. Entering the location, you will find a bunch of ruined buildings, and nearby, two characters, Jesse Pinkman and Walter White. Jesse will tell you the location of all their dealers, while Mr. White will only sell you meth if you have 120 renown. Cheat menu, give renown, there we go. Oh, it's 2,000 dinars? Once you bought meth, you can go to any dealers, so of course I went to see Tuco, and he bought it from me for a few more 100 dinars than I bought it. And that's essentially it. Native Calradia, with the option to buy and distribute meth from Heisenberg himself. Oh, there's also a Los Polos Almanos in every town where you can buy chicken, although I haven't seen Gus anywhere. Now, obviously the mod is a bit silly, but give the guy a break. It's his first mod ever, which still makes him a much better modder than I ever could be. But jokes aside, there's definitely potential here. The mod doesn't need to have guns or to be brought to the modern day. The very concept of Walter White and company just living in medieval Calradia and selling meth, that's pretty cool. If anything for the future, what would be awesome is a story mod, where you get to help them sell meth and expand the meth empire. There could be a new bandit faction called the Cartel that is actively seeking you out. Eventually, you could become enemies with kingdoms for selling drugs. There could even be a system of bribery. So many possibilities. It would never be a super ambitious mod, but it would definitely be unique and really funny. But yeah, that's about it. Breaking Bad mod for Warband. That's where it's at. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Mountain Blade Warband. If there's one thing I've been trying to escape and continuously failing to, it's the modding content. Even though I ranked and reviewed all the mods I could countless times, the requests for more mod videos keep coming, so I have no choice. I'm trapped here. Forever. Ever since I did that last ranking, there's been an ongoing streak of complaints that the video wasn't really fair to people's favorite mods, which is true, because by design, ranking mods from number 89 to number 1 was never going to be fair for all the mods. Of course it was never going to make everyone happy, and I'm sorry that I don't share your nostalgia for Prophecy of Pandora or your love of Lord of the Rings. I'm only human. But recently, I've been thinking about if I had to do the ranking all over again, is there a way I could do it in a fairer manner? Ideally in a way that's much easier for me to do, and also in a way that would briefly quench my audience's endless thirst for Warband modding content? Well, I thought of something, and there you go. This is the official Warband mods tier list, which I've made myself and left a link for in the video description, so feel free to check it out and make your own ranking. But for today, we'll be ranking all of the mods again, but through a tier list. So let's break the tier list down. Starting with Hot Mess, these are the either broken or too weird or wacky mods that end up making the Warband gaming experience even worse. This is followed by Mild, mods that work but don't offer much of anything that's really memorable. This is then followed by Alright, which means they're pretty good but not spectacular. In Solid, these are all the really good mods all around, from the size, to the ambition, to the quality, and really the only difference between Solid and Top Picks is that Top Picks are my personal favorite based on my taste, my personal nostalgia. They're basically the mods that if I had to pick a few mods to survive and leave all the others to vanish forever, well, the Top Picks would be these mods. My hope though, by using a tier list instead of doing a ranking, is to not have to put a number on any given mods, which I think will make it fairer. So with all of that, let's get to it. Alright, so starting with 180 euros, I'm gonna put this one in Alright. It's a pretty decent medieval Chinese mod, but there's still a lot of stuff missing, and it kinda gets repetitive, and the spelling isn't that great, so, you know, it's okay. 1257 AD though is definitely gonna be a solid. I mean, obviously it's one of the biggest mods there is. If you're looking for a medieval mod, this is probably going to be the one that you'll pick, but it's not one of my personal favorites, but I can totally see how it would be for a lot of people. 12th century I'm gonna put in Alright as well. It's a pretty cool Chinese mod, similar to 180 euros, although this one extends all the way to the Middle East. But even though the mod advertises itself as like, you know, you get to play as the Mongols, there's actually a lot of restrictions on getting Mongolian troops, so it's kind of counterintuitive, and as a nation mod on its own, it's just not that amazing. 1429, the 100 Years' War, is gonna go in Alright as well. It's actually a pretty solid mod when it comes to the 100 Years' War, but as far as I know, it was never complete. Some of the quests are broken, and it is in French, so it's not for everybody. 16th century, I'm also going to put in alright. This is probably one of the biggest mods there is, and because like it's the entire world, and that does make it like very impressive because it covers all of the cultures of the time period, but in terms of gameplay itself, it doesn't actually add anything new to native Warband, nothing much anyway, so you know, it's alright, that's the whole point. 1860s Old America, I'm gonna put in mild. It's a pretty fun mod, like it's a western and there's definitely a lot of efforts that went into the scenery, but once again we have the same issue, which is that in terms of gameplay there just isn't much there, you know? Then we have 2D fights but Warband, which is obviously gonna go in hot mess. This is the one mod that puts everything in 2D but keeps the world in 3D. I mean, it's really experimental, but there's not much to say about it, it's pretty dumb. And as the first top pick, we have 457 AD. Yep, totally a top picks. As a Roman mod, it's actually pretty solid. As a mod that focuses on the collapse of Rome, it's amazing, and the level of detail, the unique quests, the new items, like, it checks all the marks, and I've fallen in love with this mod the moment I picked it. A Clash of Kings? Also a top pick. This was actually the first Game of Thrones mod I played, and I actually played it before I started reading the books, and I still got hooked. The world is beautiful, all the unique quests, all the unique explorations. As a solo adventurer, it's a very amazing mod to play, and I've just enjoyed it thoroughly. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, so, you know, that's just how it is. A New Dawn, it's gonna go in alright. Pretty much all of the mods that enhance just the native experience is probably gonna end up in alright anyway, and A New Dawn is just one of them. It just adds a whole bunch of features on top of native Calradia. So a lot of people like the mod. For me, meh. A World of Ice and Fire, same as A Clash of Kings. This is another amazing Game of Thrones mod, with the main difference from A Clash of Kings being that this one is also based on Britain Walda, so it's meant to be a lot more hardcore. So you can go with either, but in terms of Game of Thrones mod, they're both solids, and I still love the series, so obviously it's a top pick. Adventure in the East is going to go in solid. This is actually a really solid mod, which is basically like 457 AD, but focuses more on the Middle East, obviously. It's also story driven, although the story is more about keeping you busy than actually giving you something that's really engaging, if I'm being honest. But the setting is obviously very well made. It's a huge mod, it's very solid, so yeah, definite recommend. Age of Sword and Sorcery? I think I'm gonna put it in alright. It's actually a pretty fun mod when it comes to the setting itself. The time period it depicts is pretty solid. It's also got a lot of magic, it's got some dungeons to explore, but in my experience it was also pretty buggy as hell, like especially the sieges. Maybe if I tried it with the script enhancer it would probably be a lot better. So it's a pretty good mod, but I wouldn't go with solid. It still needs a few things more for that. American Civil War Revived, though, definitely solid. In terms of like Civil War mods, it's absolutely stunning, the gun formations work really well, the sound effects are absolutely gruesome and memorable, and it's still in active development, so they've been adding more scenery, more features, so it's really a solid mod all around. I don't have much to say about it. Alt Caesar on the Hill, definitely a top pick, best Roman mod ever, so many layers of detail, intense level of kingdom management, Britain Walda mechanics, it's got it all. I mean, it could easily be an entire game on its own. Banner page? I'll make a concession here and put it in solid. I did say that like most native plus mods will end up in alright because of how they basically enhance native, but they don't really do anything besides that, but Banner page, to its credit, has like a lot of different layers that do make it a really solid experience. Like, if you didn't want to play a mod that takes you to a different place, Banner Page is like an entirely new expansion for native, and as such, I do think it deserves to be in the solid rank, even if other similar mods probably won't make it in that rank. Bellum and Parry, I'm gonna put it in solid. In terms of gameplay mechanics, I don't recall them being all that impressive, but it did recreate the entire world of the Roman Empire faithfully. It's a massive map, it's got it all, it checks all the marks. So basically, if you thought Alt Caesar on the Hill was too intense, you could essentially have a similar experience playing Bellum and Parry, so it's a pretty solid mod. Between Empires, absolutely, this is a solid mod. I mean, the entire world of Europe, the scenery, the uniforms, and of course the guns and the artillery, you can't make this stuff up. It looks absolutely amazing. I wouldn't put it in one of my top picks personally, because by design, I just find it to be too difficult at times. A lot of the NPCs will dig trenches, which makes sense, but it also makes battles very difficult, and in a way that kind of takes away from the experience, in my opinion. But you can't deny that in terms of gun mods, it's probably one of the best there is. Blood and Steel is definitely going to go in alright. This is one of the oldest mods there is, and it is essentially a native plus mod, but what I really liked about it is that it just made battles ridiculously intense, over the top, and it's really fun for it. But in terms of everything else, I mean, it's still native Warband, so pretty fun to play, but not actually that ambitious. Bones of Ragnvald, top picks. Especially when it comes to story-driven mods, this is probably the mod that has the most complex story that can really keep you engaged for a time, and on top of that, of course, it's a massive world with fantasy elements, all the cool stuff you would expect from a solid total conversion, so Bones of Ragnvald, definitely in my top picks. Breaking Bad though, definitely a hot mess. This mod mostly feels like a joke, there's really not a whole lot to say, basically native Calradia, but you can buy meth and distribute it, that's literally it. It's a pretty funny mod, but you know, not much else to say. When it comes to Calradia, I think ultimately it's going to end up in alright. It's basically another native enhanced mod, with the main noticeable feature being the Calradia storyline, which is the idea that as the main character, your main mission is to find all the gems to make the Calradia crown, which makes you the Emperor of Calradia, at which point all the other factions will declare war on you. So it definitely makes for an interesting way to play the native campaign, but that's really all it does. There's no noticeable extra features on top of that. Calradia 1417 is also going to end up in alright. Basically native Calradia, but in the late Middle Ages, and as such, the armors and weapons are improved, I guess. There's also lots of Easter eggs, which makes it pretty cool, but, you know, it's still native Calradia just 200 years later. Then there's Calradia Borderlands, which, if it was me personally, I would probably end up putting it in mild, but in terms of quality, it's probably just gonna go in alright as well. Basically just another native enhanced mod, but what this one does is just massively increase the size of the world map, which isn't my thing, but it does introduce new cultures, and with their weapons and armors, and new factions and everything, so in terms of the effort being put into it, it's pretty solid, but that's really not my thing personally. I am tired of playing in native Calradia, as I've told many times by now. Chronicles of Might and Magic is definitely a solid mod. It's based on Heroes of Might and Magic, which I hear a lot of people enjoy. In terms of total conversions, it's really solid. As far as I can tell, it follows the original games very faithfully. There's lots of variety in the non-human species, as well as spells. So, very solid mod all around. Crusaders and Jihads is also gonna go in solid. It's just one of those really good crusade mods. This one is a story campaign, which is pretty cool as well. Could be a little laggy, but otherwise it's very solid. CSGO but Warband, definitely a hot mess. I mean, I don't have much to say about that one. The last update actually made it worse than it was before. You're better off just playing regular CSGO. Then we have Deeds of Arms and Chivalry, which is basically 1429 updated, so it works a lot better. Like, if you were to choose between 1429 and Deeds of Arms and Chivalry, like, this one is just, like, polished, just better all around, so I'm gonna put it in solid. Like, in terms of quality, it's right up there. It's basically the continuation of 1429, so it deserves that spot. Diplomacy for Let Them Reloaded, another native enhanced mod, it's alright. Dragon Ball Z Vegeta, hot mess. Obviously. Though I gotta say, it was pretty impressive what they managed to pull off with that one, but it was never going to make for an amazing gaming experience. Evlat, I will also put at alright. It's basically the same guy who did Calradia. In fact, I think Calradia is the prequel, but Evlat is basically native Warband, but story-driven. It's got an interesting storyline, though it's not that complex or engaging, but it makes for a refreshing experience. Explorer, very experimental, bold, but still a hot mess ultimately. Imagine playing native Warband, but without a world map, so you literally gotta travel everywhere. It gets grindy very quickly, which is exactly what ended up happening with Explorer. 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms is the one solid Asian mod in my opinion. It features several countries including Mongolia and China, and the scenery was actually really solid. The sieges were a little ridiculous, but the battles themselves were a lot of fun. In that sense, the mod was really fun to play, so it was pretty solid. Floris, native enhanced, it's alright. Honestly, like, between all of these native enhanced mods, like, it's really, like, the smallest of differences that's going to make a difference on which you prefer. And now we're at Gegokujo, which is going to be a top picks purely for the nostalgia, I'm being honest, though it is undeniably, in my opinion, a very solid mod. In terms of samurai mods, there's a reason we don't really think of any other. It's because it quickly became the total conversion that everybody goes for, and it's got all the extra features for kingdom management and freelancer, all the good sum mods basically. It's got guns as well. I can't complain about Gegokujo. For what it intended to do, it's perfect. Golden Earth I'm going to put in mild. It was a pretty good idea to make a mod based on the Vikings in the New World, but as it stands, this mod doesn't actually offer much. In terms of new gameplay elements, there's virtually none. The world map is very large, but also very sparse. There's not a whole lot to do. So it's basically Britannwalda without all the cool features of Britannwalda, and in a world that doesn't actually offer much to begin with. So yeah, it's pretty mild in my opinion. Grande Armée? Grande Armée is the continuation of L'Aigle, which we have yet to get to. I'm going to put this one in solid. I mean, in terms of like Napoleonic War mods, it's right up there, though it was based off L'Aigle, but it's got the uniforms, it's got the muskets. If you enjoy musket mods, Grande Armée is definitely gonna be one you should try. Hispania 1200 I'm gonna put in alright. This mod is medieval mods based mostly in Spain and Portugal. And it is massive, the music is great, the items are cool, but in terms of kingdom management or new layers of gameplay, there wasn't any that I found to be really memorable, so that's why it's alright. Honor and Glory is going to go in solid. Yeah, I'll put it in solid. Basically, if you don't want to play with fire and sword, you'll get a very similar experience for free playing Honor and Glory, which takes the exact setting at more or less the exact same time period. And I heard it got an update recently, so I should check it out again. But, you know, late medieval, guns, pikes, so it's a pretty solid mod overall for what it intended to do. In the Name of Jerusalem, also a solid mod. I mean, in terms of Crusades mod, it's right up there with the best of them. It's high quality. I have very little complaints about it. Independence of Chile, though, is going to be mild. Basically a Muscan mod in South America, and it's got all the items, it's got the guns, but virtually nothing else in terms of gameplay elements, so it tended to get redundant fairly quickly. Iskla mod, another native enhanced mod. This one I'm going to also put in alright, I guess. Actually, I'll put it in mild. Like, at that point, it just got so redundant. I'm sorry. The main thing that this one offers is for you to start as a ruler and to create your own troop trees. But that's about it. In terms of native enhanced, I would say I have more fun playing Floris or Banner Page than I do with this one, so here it is. L'Aigle I'm going to put in alright. It's basically Grande Armée but unfinished, and the AI is just not that great, so battles tend to unnecessarily drag on for a while. But yeah, like if there's Grande Armée that's already pretty solid, you might as well just stick with that one, so L'Aigle can stay in alright, despite being, visually at least, very high quality. The Last Days of the Third Age, as I've said, I'm not a big fan of Lord of the Rings, but you can't deny that it's very much a solid mod. In terms of Lord of the Rings, it's got the entire world, it's got all the factions, it's got the campaign, it's got all the fantasy species. So, you know, if you like Lord of the Rings, like, this mod's got everything, and it's still in active development, so you can't go wrong with it. Legacy of the Dragon is also going to go in solid. In terms of fantasy mods, it's very good, it's got spells, it's got non-fantasy species, it's got a bit of a story, although it's not centered at all to the mod. So, in terms of fantasy mods, it's right up there with the best of them in my opinion. Light and Darkness, Heroes of Calradia. I actually really liked this mod when I first played it. Now I'm hesitating. I think I'm gonna put it in solid, mainly for the story. Like, it does have like a really solid story that has you interact with all the companions throughout, but the reason I would also put it in alright is because in terms of gameplay changes, it doesn't really offer any, and while the story itself is engaging, the quests themselves can be very grindy, so it's a bit hit and miss, although in terms of story mods, there is no denying that it's one of the most ambitious. Medieval Conquest is basically the same as 1257 AD with a few tweaks, so I'm gonna put it in solid as well. Native New Design also goes in alright. Native New Design, more features in Native Calradia, so again, if it's your thing, you'll enjoy it, but I wouldn't give it a solid spot personally. New World 1521 I would definitely put in alright, considering like the original setting and the beautiful visuals and everything, but it's also very unstable, even with the script enhancer, so unfortunately it's gonna go in mild. Nova Eras though? Definitely a top pick. The level of management in Nova Eras is so cool, from the ability to create multiple sources of income by buying enterprise and buying buildings to rent them out, or just the ability to create your own colonies in the new world. And the addition of new factions and a bunch of new lore. Honestly, Nova Eras is one of my personal favorites, one of the first ones I ever played. So yeah, definitely a top pick. Paradigm Worlds could be either solid or a hot mess, depending on how you personally feel about it. But in terms of quality, I have to put it in solid. I mean, it is obviously highly experimental, but in terms of fantasy, it's also one of the wackiest there is. It's just so much fun to play this mod, have no idea what's going on, and still have an absolute blast. It's Warband at its most ridiculous, basically. Paris, no, I mean, there is no secret there. For me, it's definitely a top pick, but overall it is still obviously a very solid mod, new world, lots of fantasy elements, still in active development, different fantasy races, unique quests, massive battles. I've praised Paris No so many times, so it's not only a top pick, it pretty much always ranks #1 whenever I do a ranking and it's included, so there you go. Fantasy Calradia is virtually the same as Legacy of the Dragon, with the exception that it still takes place in native Calradia, so I'm gonna put it in alright, if only because it stays in Calradia. Though honestly, it is still a fun mod to play, and if you've never played fantasy mods in Warband, it's usually the mod I recommend to get you started. Prophecy of Pendor. Yes, it is an absolutely solid mod, but not a personal favorite to earn the top picks, so personally I've never enjoyed it because I think it's intentionally too grindy, but you know, opinions and experiences vary widely. I know it's a solid mod, so you know, here it is. I hope you're happy with that. Red Wars, I'm going to put in alright. Red Wars is actually a very fun mod when it comes to the World War I, World War II aesthetic, but it's also incomplete and broken, so I can't put it in solid because of that. Renaissance, I'm going to put in solid simply because in terms of quality, like, you'll never get a literal Italian Renaissance mod better than Renaissance. Revenge of the Berserk, though, definitely a top pick. Still in development, one of the best story-driven mods there is, and the idea of playing as this massive swordsman that's just tearing through endless rows of enemies is just too much fun to resist. Not that great as a sandbox, but as a story with this character, and it actually does a pretty good job of adapting the manga as far as I know. So Revenge of the Berserk, definitely a must try. Rising Sun is also a very solid mod. Basically Gekokujo, but a few hundred years later, during industrialization, and in terms of quality, it's about the same. I wouldn't put it in top picks because I don't have the same nostalgia for it as I do for Gekokujo, but in terms of gun mods, it's really solid, and in terms of industrial Japan mods, it's perfect, look no further. Rome at War is also a fairly old mod, I think, that hasn't been updated in a while, and in terms of Roman mods, it's probably not the most ambitious, but I would still say it's really solid. In terms of combat, even though I had not played it before I reviewed it, I thought it was just perfect for what it intended to do. So there you go. Rust 13th Century, I would put it solid if it wasn't so ridiculously hardcore. This is one mod that you'll never be able to beat unless you cheat. So, you know, like, I know some people really enjoy a punishing experience, but I think there's having a punishing experience and there's having like a mod that's playable. And I would say Rust 13th Century is so difficult that it's almost impossible to rise in any significant way. It's just too hard. Sins of Faith, another Crusade mod, I think one of the OGs actually when it comes to those, and you could pick either that one or the others when it comes to Crusade mod, is just as solid. I ain't got no complaints. Sayazan was actually a mod I had in my backlog to do my final big ranking, and it would have been solid if morale wasn't so broken. Like, troops in this mod automatically rout the moment they make contact with the enemy, and it just made for the mod to be completely absurd. If it wasn't for that, it would be a totally solid mod, but because there is that issue, it's gonna stay in alright. Skyrim Civil War, this one goes in mild. I mean, it did get the world of Skyrim perfectly, it got all of the items, it brought the music, but it virtually has nothing in terms of gameplay layers, so it's a literally native Calradia, just in Skyrim instead. So I don't have much else to say about it. Snow in the East is going to go in alright. It's basically like Red Wars, but in the real world, in the Eastern Front in World War II, and it's got all the elements, it's got everything you could ask for, it's pretty solid in terms of the aesthetic. The problem is that as a gun mod, it's really broken, especially when it comes to the sieges. This is literally impossible. Sparta is the same as with Rust 13th Century. In terms of ancient Greece mods, it's got everything you could possibly ask for. The music, the items, even the phalanx formation. Amazing. I can't complain about it. But the mod was also purposefully designed to be ridiculously hardcore. And because of that, you can basically not play the mod without cheating, and even when you cheat, it's pretty difficult. So because of that, it's going to end up in alright. Star Wars Conquest, though, definitely solid. I mean, if there's one world you couldn't possibly imagine getting ported to Warband, it's Star Wars, but Star Wars Conquest did it amazingly well. And people keep telling me it got remastered recently, so I should definitely look into that, but in terms of gun mods and science fiction mods, I mean, it's perfect. Like, seriously. Struggle for the Iliac Bay, definitely a solid mod. Unlike Skyrim Civil War, this one is based on Daggerfall, I believe, and is just way better than Skyrim Civil War in every way. The world, the items, the species, like everything is pretty solid, but it also has a lot of extra layers when it comes to kingdom management, when it comes to some mods, and it's got dungeons that are really cool to explore as well. So in terms of mods, it's really solid. If you're a fan of the Elder Scrolls, you will definitely enjoy this mod. Suvarnabhumi Mahayuth, and I'm sorry, I'm definitely butchering it. This one I'm also going to put in solid. This one takes us to Vietnam and Indonesia in the period of exploration by the Spanish conquistadors, and in terms of visuals, it is absolutely a beautiful mod. The mod features guns, it features lots of different weapons, it's got war elephants, which are also pretty cool, all around very solid and doesn't get enough attention. Check this one out. Then we have Sword of Damocles, which is also one of the OG mods, and this one is definitely going in alright. It's basically a total conversion that's kind of half-assed if I'm being honest. It's got a much bigger world than native Warband, but it still brings those native factions into it, on top of creating new factions. What really makes this mod fun is that everything is upscaled to ridiculous proportions. You can make a crap ton of money in tournaments, and pools of mercenaries and peasants are usually so massive, you can just constantly rebuild your armies with just a few clicks. Because of that, it's a really fun mod to play, but it doesn't add enough for me to consider it solid. Similarly, we have Tainted Paths, and this mod is just confusing as hell. It's got a lot of ambition, it has a massive world, it even has a story campaign, but the features are so confusing on their own that they kind of take away from the gaming experience. So I would normally put it in solid, but because it's confusing, I'm putting it as alright. The Eagle and the Radiant Cross, definitely a hot mess. This is just my personal experience, but all this mod really does is add guns to native Calradia from the first Mount and Blade Warband, and none of the towns or castles ever loaded for me. It's so awkward, honestly. That might just be my experience, but my experience made for a real hot mess, so that's why it's there. Then we have the Reckoning 3rd State, which I am putting in solid. Despite being fairly unstable, it's the one mod to my knowledge to add tanks that actually work, helicopters that actually work, and it's a post-apocalyptic zombie mod on top of it all. So it was just so much fun to play this mod. If it was more stable, it would have definitely been a top pick. Which brings us to Reckoning New Beginning, which is like the sequel to 3rd Stage, and this one is just a hot mess, largely because it's incomplete. Guns can't be found anywhere except for the ones you start with. The zombies are so ridiculously overpowered that you can never defeat them without cheating. And there's just not a whole lot to do. The mod is just incomplete, that's the main issue with it. And that leaves us with the Reckoning, which is the original zombie mod, which I'm going to put in alright. Like, it was very ambitious, it did create most of the post-apocalyptic scenery that you later see in the other two mods, and it's introduced interesting game concepts, but as a zombie mod, it's just not that great. It gets very repetitive, the zombies themselves aren't particularly dangerous. It also just feels like a diamond in the rough, like it would need more work and more polishing to really be what it was supposed to be. But it was still a very good effort, no doubt. The Triple Alliance felt a lot like Independence of Chile, so it's going to end up in mild as well, with the main difference there that enemy NPCs were so inaccurate that it basically broke battles altogether. And really that's the main reason I didn't like that mod. Then we have Tuluberia, which I'm going to put in alright. I mean, it does have like an entirely new world, it brings new items, which includes guns, and one of the things that initially really impressed me with it was the fighting animation, but that's a some mod that also exists in other mods that I've discovered since then. So, in terms of total conversions, it's probably one of the most forgettable there is. Toho Gensokyu Warfare though, definitely solid. You would not expect this aesthetic to work so well in Warband, but it does. And the story is really fun and charming, the universe is fascinating. Ever since I played it, I immediately fell in love with it, even though I know nothing about the host. So pretty solid total conversion for that universe. Definitely check it out if that world interests you. Viking Conquest is definitely solid, though I would not consider it a top pick, surprisingly. I mean, it is solid, but in terms of the upgrade from its original mod, Brit and Walda, buying Viking Conquest as a DLC just isn't worth it in my opinion, especially at full price. And what it does add from Brit and Walda is pretty mild on its own. And it also made a lot of things more complicated than it should be. I go more into it into my exclusive review, so do check it out. So obviously Viking Conquest is really solid, but I don't have any nostalgia for it, so that's why it ends up in solid. So rank it as you will. Violence Basketball but Warband, I'll actually put in alright. Like, of all the wackiest mods I've ever played, Violence Basketball actually works in terms of what it's supposed to do. So whether you're playing soccer or basketball or tennis, it's ridiculous, it's fun, and it doesn't feel broken, despite how absolutely ridiculous it is. So it was pretty funny and stable enough that I actually played it for a bit. Yeah, it's alright in my opinion. Warcraft 3 but Warband, I would probably have to try it again to see how it works now, but when I did, it was just an absolute hot mess. Once again, like surprisingly high quality, the fact that they were able to bring all the assets from Warcraft 3 as well as the scenery and everything, but the way it was designed is fundamentally broken. Like the HUD at the bottom is just completely ridiculous. It was extremely buggy, so a lot of things tend to crash at random, there's no story, and the world itself is just not polished at all. So again, it's an interesting experiment, but that's all it really is, unfortunately. An experiment. Warsaw Conquest, definitely solid, of course, not one of my top picks, but in terms of fantasy, based on Warhammer, it's probably one of the most ambitious. It's absolutely amazing. It's got the spells, it's got all the species, it's got all the scenery that is more beautiful than the next. So, of course, Warsaw Conquest is also one of the best mods ever made. Only reason it's not in my top picks is once again because I don't have an emotional attachment to it, but I can definitely believe that a lot of people will. Then there's Warzone-Acron, which is a fairly recent mod, but one of my favorites in terms of gun mods. They nailed the mechanics spectacularly. The post-apocalyptic world based on Fallout is also amazing. And you know I'm probably very biased on it too, but they did add me as a companion recently, and that just made me love the mod even more. Obviously I'm biased, but it was already in my top picks, and it did rank fairly high in my massive ranking from a few months ago, which was before the companion. So really, it's just a solid gun mod. It works phenomenally well, highly stable, and that's about it really. I don't have much else to say about it, just check my exclusive review to see what I'm talking about. Then we have Wind of the War, which is also an old mod, and this one I'm going to put in mild. A late medieval / Renaissance mod that takes place over the entirety of Europe, but it was obviously not finished, so I don't have much else to add about it. With Fire and Sword is the paid expansion that is basically the same as Honor and Glory in terms of time period. I didn't actually like it all that much. I felt it didn't really improve a whole lot more from Warband, but it was the DLC that made it possible in Warband to have guns. So, you know, you can't deny that. And there's different stories you can do, so they do keep you engaged, but they're also kind of broken. You have to be careful on how you play them, otherwise it could screw up the whole game. So in terms of quality, I would not say it's so bad that it lands in alright, but in my opinion, it barely deserves to be in solid. I feel like if you take it as a mod, it's very hit and miss. World of Vaznar, top pick. Ever since I started playing it, I just love the world that it created. The mix of time periods works really well. The music, the atmosphere, to be able to play as a vampire, necromancy spells, dungeons to explore. I mean, in terms of fantasy mods, it's not the most ambitious, but it does feel surprisingly well balanced, and everything just flows very well, so it's definitely one of my top picks. And that leaves us with Britannwalda, which I forgot to add, so here it is. And basically, like I said, Britannwalda is just the predecessor to Viking Conquest, and this is where all my nostalgia is, so it's definitely going in top picks. It is a very hardcore mod, but unlike Sparta, for example, it does give you the options to reduce the difficulty considerably, at which point the mod becomes very enjoyable. It also has some of the best siege mechanics that I've enjoyed of all Warband mods to this day. The map itself is so condensed with so many factions and bandits that the campaign is actually a lot of fun, so Britannwalda has always been one of my top picks, pretty much always close to Paris now. And that's about it for today. No big outro this time, this was pretty straightforward and I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember, the tier list is in the description, so feel free to use it for your own amusement. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.